All right, I'd like to reconvene the City Council meeting for March 22nd, 2011. Would you please do the roll call?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Thank you. Do we have a closed session report, Mr. City Attorney?
We do, Mr. Mayor, and the closed session matters are reflected in Roman numeral 2 of your agenda. The council discussed those matters as reflected there in the agenda, and no reportable action was taken.
Okay, well now we would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. Boy Scout Troop number 37 will present the colors and do the Pledge of Allegiance for us, and then I will do the invocation after they are finished.
Will the audience please rise? Color guard attention. Color guard advance. Color guard, prepare to post the colors. Post the colors. Scout salute. Will the audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
2. Color guard, please pay your respects. Color guard dismissed.
Please remain standing. Gentlemen, thank you very much. As for the invocation, we were reminded today of a quote from one of dear Lord, one of your most reverend disciples, Mother Teresa, who said, "The biggest problem in the world today is that we draw the circle of our family too small." Since our last council meeting, the truth of that sentiment rings in our minds every day as we witness events large and small outside of our beautiful city of Newport Beach and our Newport Beach family. Events such as the terrible earthquake in Japan, the actual and expected savagery in Libya that has drawn us into yet another war, and closer to home, the tragic and seemingly unnecessary death of Guy Pham in Costa Mesa. In each case, there is personal loss and terrible pain suffered by real people on many levels that we cannot begin to appreciate. The people affected by these tragedies are real, and they are part of the brotherhood of man. They are our family in the greater circle of our world. We share their pain and beseech you, dear Lord, to comfort them in their hour of need. Lord, we also know that you are infinitely loving and benevolent as you shepherd each member of our family on earth. As imperfect mortals, though, we often fail to understand your greater plan for each of us, and we cannot understand how these terrible events are consonant with your love and benevolence. In the invocation for the last council meeting, we prayed to you to make us strong. Tonight we pray more than ever for that strength and ask for more. We ask that as time passes, you reveal to us an understanding of your plan and how these recent events may yet yield a better world for our earthly family. And we ask, as we go about the daily business of our city and our individual lives, that your perfect guidance will always be with us, and that you will help us understand and be ever mindful of the need to value, respect, and cherish each and every member of our family here on earth. Amen. I believe we have presentations this evening, the first of which is to recognize the Corona Del Mar High School boys water polo team the 2010 CIF Southern Section Division II champions. And so may we have a representative of the team? I think we have the whole team, yeah. Strapping young men.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, Leslie Daigle, Dave Kiff. Thank you for inviting us. It's a great honor for us to be here. We appreciate the recognition that you're showing us, and we also would like to thank you for your help and support in making it possible for us to have the Marion Bergeson Aquatic Center, which is truly a flagship facility in the city of Newport Beach, which is making it possible for us to develop the championship teams that we have and that we're so proud of. These teams, not only do they bring honor to the school, but they bring honor to the city of Newport Beach. And let me please introduce to you a few representatives of the team. We have our head coach, Barry O'D, who not only was he awarded Coach of the Year for the water polo season, but he's a back-to-back winner of Coach of the Year, also for swim team, where the Division I swim team from CDM, the boys swim team was recognized last year. We're currently ranked number 2. We're going for number 1. To his left is our coach, Bill Leach, who is actually an alum of CDM and also a former Olympian. We are also pleased to have with us today Hayden Leach, one of our senior captains. We have Bruce Bear, also a senior captain. We have Ben Zepfel, who's currently a junior, Ari Marks, and we have Wes Sherburne, which are the leaders of the next, hopefully, 2011 championship team. We brought something to remember us by, if I can approach.
Did you wish to take a photo at this juncture, or?
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
take care of it, Steve.
Let's do that. We'll have.
All right. Well, then, I did want to note that Council Member Daigle has requested that you get this honor here at this council meeting, and I also wanted to note that Marion Bergeson is in the audience, and so I'd like to suggest that perhaps Council Member Daigle and Marion Bergeson join me down there for a photograph. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you again for having us.
Around a little bit here.
Thank you again for inviting us to share this evening with you, and thanks again for your past and future support.
Near as I can tell, they're all using the correct fingers. Okay, I understand now we have a presentation regarding the Orange County Water District stormwater capture issue. Directors Steve Shelton and Mike Marcus from the Orange County Water District are here. This is an update for the City Council about recent stormwater flow capture behind the Prado Dam and the challenges for the Orange County Water District in capturing this cost-efficient water source.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Steve Sheldon. I am your elected representative on the Orange County Water District. My district is Division 7 and Division 5, excuse me, and it encompasses most of Irvine, about two-thirds of Newport Beach, and a little bit of the Tustin area. I share Newport Beach with Director Sean Duane, who replaced former Mayor Jan DeBay. She stepped down from our water district. Sean was elected to take that seat when she chose not to run for re-election. Joining me today is Mike Marcus, our general manager. So if you have some tough questions, he'll be able to answer them because I probably won't be able to. And I want to thank you. We wanted to come and update you on the stormwater capture and just the kind of the general state of water here in Orange County. And we have a PowerPoint, and I'll work through it fairly quickly. The first picture here is a picture of Prado from the back, looking out toward the 71 and the 91, so you can kind of see the inside view of the house, so to speak, that's looking out. Go next. Dave, how do I go there? There you go. All right. Right. As I mentioned, the Orange County Water District is a special district. We overlie the central and north Orange County. We serve 2.4 million people. And the 65 and 35 is the groundwater for our service area and for Newport Beach. 65% of your water comes from groundwater. The other 35% comes from imported water, which is from the Bay Delta and the Colorado River. And we know with the issues up in the Bay Delta, that water is expensive and not reliable. And so the groundwater we're trying to make more and more reliable. Here in Southern California, as I mentioned, we have the Bay Delta. We have challenges with the Santa Ana River and with our arid region, and we have recurring droughts, which create issues. Some years we may have a lot of water in the groundwater basin, and then it's pumped, and other years we don't get a lot of rain, and we don't. So this year we are able to be fortunate to have our past rains in December and just recently a few days ago that have helped us to bring the groundwater basin back up. The other issue that's affecting Orange County, something to note, is that districts up the Santa Ana River in Riverside County, San Bernardino County, are doing more water recycling, and so that is having them put less water in the river, and that's creating less water for us to receive down on the back end, which is affecting how much water that we can percolate. So that's something that we're definitely monitoring and watching. Here is just a picture of Prado from the 71 and the 91. As I mentioned, the reason Prado is important, it serves two purposes. It serves as flood prevention, its primary purpose for the Corps of Engineers, and the other purpose is for the water retention so that we can use it to replenish the groundwater basin. Water from Prado is basically free. We just have to pay to push it in the percolation ponds and then to pump it out. It costs about $245 per acre foot versus the expensive imported water, which is $850 per acre foot. So it's significantly less. There's kind of a blow-up of the picture where you can see the mountains and the water gushing out. And the point of this picture more is that water gushing out is probably at such a velocity that we can't capture it. So we try to coordinate with the Corps of Engineers during rains, which I'll get into further, that when they reach a certain elevation, they have to let the water go a lot faster because they have that 505 or 498 elevation that they have to meet. And we always try to coordinate with the Corps to slow down that release, because if it goes too fast down the river, we can't capture it. Here's just kind of a picture we put together showing in the non-flood season, the Corps of Engineers stores the water up to 505 feet, which is from March 1 to September 30, and we're in that period right now. And then during the flood season, it goes down to 498. So when we're in that heavy December rain, I'll be able to show you further, we weren't able to capture a significant amount of water was not able to be captured during the rain in December, which is a problem, and we're constantly working to resolve with the Corps of Engineers. Here's a picture of the outflow. You can see it flowing fairly quickly. The Corps can release water as high as 4.5 million gallons per minute during the flood season. And we're only able to capture it at 450,000 gallons per minute or less. So sometimes that water can flow out significantly faster than we're able to capture it. And again, we work with them to slow down the flows, and it's in everyone's best interest to do that. This past rain, we recorded 32.5 billion gallons of water was stored behind Prado. We were able to capture a large amount, though not enough. As the Army Corps, as they released the water, 26 billion gallons was lost to the ocean. So again, we're working with the Corps to do various things to raise the dam, to perhaps have more retention basins there behind Prado, so they are comfortable in their primary purpose of flood control to be able to store more water behind Prado. Because of the recent levels of rain, our basins are full. The basins that you might see in Anaheim, off the 91 and the 55, the Santa Ana Fishing Lakes, that's a large basin we call Warner Basin. And we have other basins in Orange, and those are full, and we're managing those. Unfortunately, again, our Army Corps does release faster than we can always capture. So that's a quick update on the stormwater. I know with the rains, we got some questions, and we want to come in and answer, make this information available. And would you like to add any information, or? I think you covered it. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner?
A question. I know that they couldn't, the Army Corps of Engineers couldn't release water probably as fast as they wanted to at one point because the Sorry line was, or is that going to be a problem next year also, or when is that going to be finished so that it won't be an issue every time there's a big storm?
I know they're working on it. When will the Sorry line be completed?
The SAR line should be completed in about 2 years, and you're absolutely right. They would have released the water at a much greater rate, except for the SAR line. And the SAR line is a pipeline, a brine line that comes from the upper watershed and is actually in the actual channel. So they're relocating it out of the live channel into the embankment. But that did affect releases. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, any further questions? All right, thank you very much, Steve, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just say that one of the things the Newport Bay Executive Committee has been working on is to try to coordinate more with the San Bernardino Riverside counties to be sure that in their recycling efforts they don't really put a whammy on us in terms of our groundwater replenishment and make sure that, well, some recycling's good, but send down as much water as you want, particularly in the off-season, so we can do our recharging as well.
All right. Notice to the public?
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in the silent mode. Now is the time for council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Councilmember Hill?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Rosansky?
Nothing, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner?
We received an email from Dudley Johnson about Castaways Park, and he had found the original ordinance, which talked about natural setting and unobtrusive additions, and wanted a response, I believe, from the city attorney's office as to what the interpretation of that was in terms of the potential placement of the Reagan statue and also the memorial that's there now. Has there been a response, or did you even get that email?
No, I received the email.
Okay.
I received it, I believe, on Friday.
Okay. I know it hasn't been very long, so.
And I've gone over the issues with the planning director as well as Parks and Rec, and discussed it with Mr. Kiff, who's the council delegated the determination to. In the end, the question is whether or not the placement of the statue, or for that matter, 1-1, is what one would call unobtrusive. That's the word utilized in the ordinance. It's in our PC text, which is in effect a specific plan for that area. And it really depends on what's going to be recommended, where it's going to go, what's its size going to be, what's the ultimate position. I've spoken with the city manager. I believe that once we get that final recommendation, that finding must be made in order to stay consistent with the PC text, that whatever is placed there will be unobtrusive.
Now, who makes that determination?
Normally, it would be the planning director, but the council has delegated this decision to Mr. Kiff. So my recommendation to Mr. Kiff is to get the input of the planning director before he makes a finding.
And you may want to kick it back to us.
The council's already taken the action to give it to Mr. Kiff, though.
I thought we had a provision in the zoning code that we were exempt from the zoning. I thought we wrote that into the new zoning code.
No, we did. That's not exactly it. You can exercise that, but I'm not sure PC text falls into that requirement.
Yeah, the new zoning code does have a provision that does allow the council to waive certain projects that the council does, but they have to outline specifically what it is they're waiving. So it's a specific council action for a particular project.
It has to be affirmative.
Yes, it is.
So anyway, have you responded to Mr. Johnson at this point?
I have not. I will do so, though.
And would you CC us so we can,
Oh, sure, absolutely.
if he gets back in touch with us, we know exactly what's been communicated?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We did acknowledge his correspondence, but no.
Anything else, Nancy? Okay, Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, next Wednesday, we're going to have the 40th Annual Police Appreciation Breakfast, and that's being held at the Marriott. The event is sponsored by our business community, and certainly protection of life and property is paramount here in Newport Beach, and the essential services provided by our police department. And so we recognize the hard work and also some of the exceptional police work that's being done in our community. And I know that we have, the district attorney has had many successful prosecutions, and a primary reason of that has been the very thorough police work being done in our community. So I know the council, we all regularly attend, and I look forward to this day of recognition myself. So thank you.
Councilmember Curry.
When the Japanese tsunami was announced, I know we have 3 phone lines at home. We had 3 phone calls between 4:15 and 4:30 in the morning. And I think our system worked very, very well. The Emergency Operations Center was operational. I was flying to Washington that day, and City Manager Kiff kept me informed about what was happening up and down the California coast by email. And fortunately, we did not have serious damage here, but more than $50 million of damage occurred along the California coast resulting from Japan. And I think that tells us a couple of things. First of all, the importance of the resources that we've dedicated to the early warning and advisory of tsunami warnings in our city, but also the importance for all of us through programs such as CERT to be responsible for our own neighborhoods in the event of a natural disaster such as this. So I encourage everybody who hasn't signed up already to think about organizing your homeowners association or your neighborhood group and get involved with our CERT program, our community emergency response team, so that you're trained and have the proper equipment in the event a natural disaster were to strike our city.
Thank you. Councilmember Selich.
I have nothing this evening.
Okay, well, it's a busy time of year, and we've got 3 weeks until the next council meeting, so I have several things that I did want to mention. The first 2 of which I think are very important for our citizens. We have formed 2 new committees in the city, a Neighborhood Revitalization Committee and a Tidelands Management Committee. And the inaugural meetings of those committees have been set. The Neighborhood Revitalization Committee will meet on Wednesday, April the 6th, between 4 and 6 p.m. at the City Council chambers. And the Tidelands Management Committee will meet on March the 30th between 4 and 6 at the City Council chambers. These are important meetings to start the process of organizing these committees. One of the things that's very important is that we get as much input from the public as we can as we go along on both of these committees' work schedules. And we do want to have a citizens advisory panel to help the council members on those committees. So I would encourage as strongly as I can any of our citizens that have an interest in the work of either of those committees, please come to those meetings if you can. If you cannot, let us know if you have interest, and we'll be wanting to move ahead promptly with the work of those committees. And then on Wednesday, March the 23rd, tomorrow, I'll be doing the Mayor's Meals on Wheels with Oasis. I'm actually looking forward to that quite a bit. Oasis is a tremendous asset to our community. This is one of the many services that they use, that they provide, especially for seniors in our community. And then tomorrow afternoon, the Marina Park, what used to be the Marina Park Committee, will be meeting. That committee has been sunsetted, but we've pulled together the members of that committee tomorrow afternoon to have another look and to get an update where we stand on that project, and then some ideas that we have about some potential modifications that we want to bounce off the people that have been involved all along in that, and of course anyone else that would like to attend. This is a great park for the city at 15th Street. We're going to spend $20, $25 million on it, and we want to make it as good as we can. 3 o'clock, thank you, David, and here in the council chambers. And then on Thursday, March the 24th, I'll be joining Council Member Curry and perhaps others, not quite sure, for the Orange County Mayor's Prayer Breakfast at the Hyatt Irvine. There will be lots of mayors there, and I had thought our supervisor, John Morlock, but apparently he's been called away. On Saturday, April the 2nd, I will be having the third of my series of Meet the Mayor arrangements. That's from 9 until 10:30 in the morning at the Newport Coast Community Center, which is in District 7. I hope I get a big turnout. On Friday, April the 8th, there will be a Gift of Literacy luncheon sponsored through the public library here at the Radisson Hotel, and I'm looking forward to that event as well. On Saturday, April the 9th, our Newport Beach firefighters will be celebrating their 100th anniversary. That's 100th anniversary here at Newport Beach with a pancake breakfast at Fire Station Number 7 in Santa Ana Heights. I'm sure everyone is invited to attend. It should be fun. They always do a good job cooking up pancakes. And then on Saturday, April the 9th, there will be, later in that same day, the Newport Beach Art Exhibition at 4:30 p.m. at our Central Library. That's also a very well-attended event. So I look forward to seeing as many people as possible at all of these events. Just another example of what a robust city we have with citizen participation in so many ways. And with that, then, we will move on to the consent calendar.
All matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 9, are considered by the council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion unless members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor and state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Okay, Councilmember Daigle, did you wish to pull any?
No items to pull, but I did want to register a no vote on number 4, and then comment on number 5 that it's good to see the city continuing to modernize our traffic control system. And when we do our citizen surveys, concerns about traffic always rank high. So it's good to see that we're trying to get it to move a little bit more efficiently. So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Curry.
Yes, and on the same vein on item 5, which is the acceptance of our traffic signal synchronization program, Steve, what is our schedule for phases 6 and 8, which extend this program to Harbor View and the Newport coast?
There we go. Yes, Councilman Curry, I did have a chance to check. We are looking at our next phases, the Newport Center area, and it will extend out San Joaquin towards the harbor, the Port Street area. Then there'll be probably a final version of that, which we call Phase 8. That'll probably come sometime after that. We're not sure how to package that yet, but we're still trying to figure that out. We would like to take advantage of the Measure M programs that are out there right now. And so we're kind of strategizing a little bit, which is why we don't have a definite answer, but we are looking forward to maybe taking advantage of those Measure M funds.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Selich.
Nothing to pull tonight.
Councilmember Hill.
Nothing to pull.
And Councilmember Rosansky.
Nothing, thank you.
And Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
Nothing.
And I have nothing to pull. Do we have any members of
Staff has one.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
I'd like to pull item number 7, the Planning Commission agenda.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that wish to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, then do I have a motion for the consent calendar?
I move items 1 through 9, excluding number 7, with a no vote on number 4 from Councilmember Daigle.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Would the city clerk please read the titles to the necessary ordinances here?
For item 3, there's ordinance number 2011-9, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach approving Code Amendment number CA 2010-010 to revise setback map number S9A, Irvine Terrace, to establish a 19-foot front setback for property located at 1537 Centinela Terrace. Item 4 has 2 ordinances. Ordinance number 2011-10, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach amending Section 3.36.030 of the Newport Beach Municipal Code pertaining to emergency transport, resident fees, arrest reports, crime reports, traffic collision reports, vehicle repossession, and massage technician application renewals. Ordinance number 2011-11, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach amending Sections 14.12.085A and 14.12.125A of the Newport Beach Municipal Code pertaining to water establishment fees and water service restoration fees.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any comment on consent calendar? All right, any members of the public wish to comment on consent calendar? Therefore, we will vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Dave, you pulled an item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is something we wouldn't ordinarily pull off the agenda. As you recall, we used to do a presentation about this, but this is the Planning Commission's agenda from its last meeting, just last Thursday night, and I wanted Jim Campbell to give you a brief discussion, knowing that you can't take an action on this, about what is item 4, and this is at the request actually of one of the planning commissioners to make sure you had an additional focus on that. So with that, Jim.
Certainly. Last Thursday, the Planning Commission considered several items, discussion items, one relating to alcohol sales. The zoning code that was recently adopted actually has provision that allows the zoning administrator to review certain establishments. The commission wanted the council to consider amending that to require planning commission review of any establishment with alcohol sales. That can be incorporated into a subsequent amendment that we plan as we bring forward amendments to the zoning code in the future. The second item is in lieu parking. The new zoning code does provide for an in lieu fee if you waive parking spaces. We have a current program that charges $150 a space. The commission wanted the council to consider and to direct staff at some future point to provide the necessary resources to establish an updated in lieu fee program. This is one that would likely take a considerable effort with consultants to develop an in lieu fee and to update that. The last item was on appeals. There's been some recent discussion with the fee schedule about planning commission and council paying the fee for appeals. The commission wanted to make sure they're on record indicating that they would like to have the consideration of not being charged a fee for appeals that they might so charge or file. Anyway, these were just discussion items the planning commission wanted the council to consider and as we move forward implementing the zoning code.
And if you had any comments about any of those, I'd certainly welcome that without having a full discussion, and include whether or not you wanted any of those specifically brought back to you for a action item.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner?
I'd be delighted to talk about all of them.
Any other council comments on that?
I'd be interested in hearing about them as well.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public that wish to comment?
Good evening, Mayor Hand and council members. My name is George Schroeder, and I've been a resident of Newport Beach for about 24 years now. I live in the 100 block of 35th Street. I was at that Planning Commission meeting last Thursday night. Also, I did attend these zoning code updates on Wednesday afternoons, probably for about two and a half years when Mayor Selig chaired it right here in this room. I read all the materials, and at the end of the meetings, he would take public comments by us in attendance. This minor use permit, which basically it's a liquor license that can be granted by one city employee, it we have a lot of concern about that. When I was attending the meetings, I did read the materials and catch that. I did speak to a member of the planning staff. I said we have certain areas in town where we have an over-concentration of liquor licenses. Even a beer and wine operation that would close at 11 p.m. could be a concern. And I was told by that planning employee that, well, in an area that has an over-concentration, we probably would not put them there. Okay, so now, and because of that, I did not raise it at that public meeting that Wednesday to bring it up so it could be discussed. At the Planning Commission meeting on Thursday night, Commissioner Torch said he was very surprised that this got through and that he didn't recall it being discussed. Commissioner Hawkins said the same thing, and it's only because at that time there was so much work being done and it came at the very end. So it's a topic I didn't bring up, it wasn't discussed, and right now this minor use permit, which is an alcohol permit that basically any storefront on Coast Highway in Corona Del Mar could get from one city employee a alcohol permit until 11 p.m. at night without it being going through a planning commission meeting. I realize it goes to what's called a zoning administrator, and they meet like on a Wednesday afternoon at 3:30, but most of us are at work and we can't show up. So, oftentimes the council refers to the citizen satisfaction survey that was done. Well, there's a reason for that, because we've always done things a certain way where there was public input. And I will say that in this city, it's fairly easy to get an alcohol license. And if it does go back before the Planning Commission, I expect most people will get their alcohol license and their permits. But at least the public will have felt they had a chance to come down and address their concerns. So I'm hoping that you will study this, and when you do this zoning code cleanup, the Planning Commission did vote unanimously that alcohol licenses should go before the Planning Commission, as they always have in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this? Okay, seeing none, do I hear a motion?
It'd just be a receive and file
I would
item.
move to
receive and file?
receive and
Okay.
file the minutes. And I would just note that the Planning Commission made some significant recommendations here. Those should come to the council in the form of a staff report and not use pulling the minutes as a mechanism for initiating the discussion on this. I think that'd be the better way to handle these kind of recommendations in the future. I move to receive and file the minutes.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Shall we vote?
Pulled it off. Okay.
All right.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. It's now time for public comments on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone that wishes to speak on a non-agenda item this evening? Seeing no one? I'm sorry.
That's all right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, staff, members of the audience, and all those people who live in beautiful Newport Beach who are at home relaxing. My name is Laura Dietz. I'm a resident of Corona Del Mar and have been very active in the community for several years, as some of you know. And part of my activities are involved in the Newport Sunrise Rotary Club, which raises funds to provide scholarships and other benefits to worthy charities, very important charities, as a matter of fact, including the Orange County Drug Court, which actually saves the taxpayers of Orange County money in the long run. The reason I'm coming tonight is that we are partnering with the Newport Central Library as a location for an event on April 2nd. It just so happens that our library director is, fortunately for us, a member of our club, a terrific individual whom you all know. And because of funding cuts from the state to the quantity, at least right now, of $250,000, the library is trying to find various sources to make up those losses. And so, to make a long story short, we are holding our fundraiser on April 2nd at the Central Library, which will close at 4 o'clock that day. Our theme is called Passport to the World, and this year, our first year we're doing this is going to be Italy. And With that will come a fabulous Italian fare from the marvelous White House restaurant in Anaheim, who for the first time is doing a catering here of this size in Newport Beach. And we have one very, very special guest. Our club has been very, very active in supporting our 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. And Sergeant Major Troy Dabney, who recently was transferred out to 29 Palms, is going to be our guest that evening. And he prepared all those wonderful young men who are currently being deployed to the Middle East that we here in Newport support. So I encourage anyone that would like to attend the event to give me a call. My home number here in Newport Beach is 721-8035, 721-8035. And thank you very much for your time, and hope some of you will join us.
Thank you, Laura. I thought I had put together the entire list of things between now and next council meeting. I'm sorry I missed yours. Okay, time for oral reports from city council members on committee activities. Council Member Daigle.
I have none.
And Council Member Curry. Council Member Selich.
No reports?
Council Member Hill.
No reports.
And Council Member Rosansky.
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
Nothing.
And I have nothing. All right, on to agenda item number 10. Do we have a staff report?
We do, Mr. Mayor and council members. This item is the Kroger Kitchen minor use permit, and it's an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of that minor use permit. As is your past practice, we'll do a brief staff presentation, and then, Mayor, you would open the public hearing, including typically inviting the applicant to speak first, the Kroger Kitchen in this case, and then close the public hearing and have your own discussion about that. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jim Campbell with our Planning Department, Community Development Department, sorry.
It's okay, Dave, thank you. This is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of Kroger Kitchen. It would be located at 3107 Newport Boulevard in the Landing Shopping Center, which is undergoing renovation here at the corner of Newport and 32nd Street. The establishment will be located directly here, which is close to Newport Boulevard. Recently authorized a Chipotle in this location, and this is where the new Vons would be going in. So this is a small eatery. It's a restaurant. We have tables inside, and we also have an outdoor patio in this location, and the kitchen here in the back area. The zoning administrator did approve this project back in January. It was appealed by 2 planning commissioners, and the planning commission conducted a hearing very recently, and they did approve the restaurant with several conditions. And I just this was really the subject of the appeal that was filed by Councilmember Rosansky, really related to the hours of operation on the outdoor patio, and so I just prepared this small chart here indicating the difference between the two. The hours of operation of the business would be 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Daily. Outdoor dining, as approved by the zoning administrator, would be closing at 10 o'clock, and that was based upon a recommendation of the police department. And alcohol service would not be restricted at all on the outdoor patio. Now, the Planning Commission did take a look at the design of the patio, looked at the barriers, and they were concerned about minors who do access this location. They're also concerned about noise. Ultimately, their consideration led to a restriction that would cease alcohol sales on the patio at 11 p.m. We're available for any other comments and questions that the council may have about the establishment. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, before I open the public hearing, does any council member have a question here of Jim? All right, then I'd like to open the public hearing. Is the applicant here, and do you wish to make a presentation, sir?
My name's Steve Geary. I'm the applicant, and the project itself at Kroger Kitchen is planning to open a gourmet burger shop in town. We are going to have a beer and wine license, and the hours that the zoning administrator gave us we felt were fair and sensitive to the neighborhood, while we want to add to the joy and entertainment of the community. I'm a resident of Corona Del Mar myself. I think the restrictions that were put on us through the Planning Commission weren't reasonable at that point to stop serving alcohol on the patio or beer and wine. The mention of the sound factor in the neighborhood, I had an acoustical engineer come out and do a study in January, in mid-January, that says should be in the report there, that the actual anticipated sound levels from our patio to the nearest residence would be significantly under the ambient sound levels that are present, and this was on a Wednesday night in January. So we didn't really feel that the restrictions of the time element for the patio, that the noise levels would reach a point that it would be detrimental to the neighborhood.
All right. Thank you, sir. Do any council members have a question of the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much. Do any members of the public wish to comment on this?
Good evening, Mayor Henn and fellow council members. My name is Sean Wiskaman, and I'm Vice President of Development for Catellis Development Corporation. We are the owners and developers of the shopping center, of which Steve will be a part of. And I just want to come up and say that one of the very first things we did when we set out to renovate this shopping center is meet with a few members of the community and get a sense for interests and concerns. And we heard the concerns about alcohol in the area and the overconcentration. And so we're certainly sensitive to that. But what I really wanted to say is that we really set out to find operators of the shopping center that will be complementary and good corporate citizens. And when we met Steve and saw what he's done in Cornell Mar, we were so enamored with his operation and him as an operator and running such a professional restaurant that we felt that this is the perfect use for what we're trying to do within the shopping center. And so, I really just I wanted to sort of state that for the record. And we've worked very closely with him. We've also kept the members of the neighborhood up to speed. We've encouraged them, some of the members of the community, to meet with them, and so we feel like we've had really positive dialogue. We're a little bit concerned about the action the Planning Commission took. It's a little concerning to us as to the concerns over the alcohol in the patio. But I just wanted to say that we're thrilled to have Steve. We think he's going to be a great addition, and I'm also here to answer any questions you might have about the shopping center in general. But anyway, just wanted to state that for the record.
Sean, on that point, do you have a grand opening date? I know you're going full blast over there.
Yeah, we sure are. So it looks like now right around mid-June is when we'll have our first sort of a grand opening. We're anxious to get our tenants started on their interiors. Right now, the only tenant that's out there, two tenants that have started their interiors are pavilions. So Vaughn's has started with their pavilions market, and they have an anticipated opening in late May. And Chase, as you might have seen lately, has started framing, and they have an opening date that's, I believe, a little bit later in June. But we hope to turn over to Chipotle, to Steve here in a few weeks, and our other tenants, and we expect them to open in the early to mid part of June. And with that, we're excited to do a grand opening and bring members of the community out, and so that'll be more to come on that. But we're just anxious to get our folks started. So.
Well, we're anxious for you to get that done too. It'll be a great addition to our community here on the peninsula.
Oh, thank you. We're excited about it. It's been a long time coming, and we can't wait for that day. It'll be a special day for us too.
Any other questions of Sean? Okay. Do we have any other members of the public that wish to comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Don Chambers. My wife and I have been residents of Newport Beach since the mid-'60s, and it appears that over the years, Newport Beach has become a destination drinking resort rather than just a destination resort. We've got enough bars in Newport Beach. I'm here to encourage you to uphold the Planning Commission's recommendation on the use permit. I would suspect that if any council members lived within a block of a Rudy's Pub on Newport Boulevard, which I do. I live at 123 31st Street, so about 2 houses in from Balboa Boulevard towards the ocean. But if you lived in that general area, you would be disturbed by the noise like my wife and I are from Rudy's. This is just going to compound the problem. You've got another outdoor, so to speak, patio drinking establishment trying to go till 11 o'clock at night. It's not reasonable. We've got enough in Newport Beach already, especially in that area. Notwithstanding the recommendations or the findings of the sound engineer, which is all theoretical, okay? I'm in the building business myself, and I know all about these consultants and what they come up with and their models and all that kind of stuff. You have to live there to understand it. You have to be in the area at night to know what kind of noise is being generated. So in closing, I just want to encourage the council members to uphold the Planning Commission. They've spent a lot of time on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments?
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. My name is George Schroeder, and I've been a 24-year resident. I actually live about 3 blocks from the shopping center, and, you know, I've been wrestling with this permit like for 2 or 3 weeks on it, just trying to figure out how I feel about it, trying to be open-minded about it. The complex, I'm very, very pleased that it's being remodeled and redone. I think the owner is doing a great job. And I want to believe that adding more liquor licenses won't aspirate the problem that we have. Because of who this operator is, I'm tending to believe probably it won't add to the problem that much. I do have my offices in Newport Center, and a bunch of us do go over for lunch at his location there. But I am concerned that we're going in a direction where we have an area where we have 78 liquor licenses in reporting District 15. That's 1 liquor license for every 38 people, that more and more are going to be added into the mix. And that, you know, 5 or 6 years from now, we'll have 1 liquor license for 25 people. We'll have 125. I'm hoping that you can say no, that you will say yes to some people and no to some. You know, I do have a small slide presentation here. I think it's about 4 pictures. Let me find it here. That's all right. Yes, it is. Thank you. Okay, you know, this isn't very good. This is my first attempt, but that red check is pretty much directly across the street from the Crow Burger will be, you know, I keep hearing that it's 225 feet to the residents. It is 225 feet, but you have to keep in mind that when the customers leave, you know, they've knocked back a few beers. It's 11 p.m. if they're on the inside or the outside. They're going to be parked in that entire parking lot. Okay, that parking lot is 80 feet from the homes directly across the street. Okay, and we have a second liquor license at Chipotle and a third one going in at Gina's Pizzas, and each location holds about 60, 65 people. So we have 200 people knocking back beers until 11 p.m. at night, and then more than likely, when they're done, and I moved here when I was 31 years old, when we would go out drinking, we'd start with beers and then do the hard drinking at, 12 o'clock at night. Okay, so most likely that parking lot is going to be full of the customers at Rudy's, Malarkey's, and the Brew Pub. So at 2 a.m., they're going to come back along 32nd Street, 80 feet from people's homes. And because I live there now, this is what happens. And they're drunk, they're arguing, they're slamming doors. So I think you should take into consideration the amount of noise, not from where the restaurant is, but from where the parking is and from how long the parking will be used. I expect the applicant to get his permit. I'm hoping that you don't go past the first recommendation, 10 p.m. I'm concerned about the patio. This isn't crystal Cove Promenade area. We do have a certain type of clientele here. I'm hoping that with his price range and the quality of the food will upgrade the clientele, but, you know, in the mix right now, the police call it the triangle. It's at Balboa and Coast Highway. Okay, this year, the alley, they have a 6-foot wall, and then at Fujiyama Sushi, they have a 6-foot wall, including the plexi. You know, I'm concerned that with a 3-foot barrier only, we do have children in the area, you know, and one of the findings is that it won't impact children in the area. This is the only supermarket we have. This was taken on a Saturday about 5 o'clock. Okay, and this is typical of what happens in that shopping center there. I'm hoping this doesn't migrate to the landing. You know, so when people leave, you know, they have to step over some of the people who've imbibed just a little bit too much. And at that very same day, at the opposite end, we had somebody else who, you know, there were 5 liquor licenses in that shopping center. We're going to add 3 up at the landing. I'm hoping the landing will do a better job than this operator does, because we don't need more of this in Newport Beach. We're trying to clean up the 4th of July, make it a family-friendly area. Liquor licenses in the area, you know, gives me a lot of concern. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Further comments?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I just wanted to say that I'm the architect for...
May we have your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Craig Oka. I'm the architect for Steve on the Kroberger Kitchen. So if you have any questions about the facility pertaining to the design of it, you can ask me. Just one comment about the patio. I realize the sensitivity to the noise and the potential of passing liquor to minors, which is obviously is illegal. The patio is important to Steve's project, primarily because as a business plan, the facility is only slightly over 1,800 square feet, and he only has 42 indoor seats, which is way under the national average for seat count per square footage, primarily because to function as a full-functioning restaurant with the menu he has and providing the restrooms per the code, the kitchen and the back of house consumes a major portion of the facility. So the patio is very important, being that it's a third of the seating. So to limit the hours of operation or the hours of alcohol service does severely limit his ability to make the business model work. So if you have any questions about the architecture, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Any questions?
Just the wall. It's a 3-foot wall. It doesn't seem very high.
The 3-foot railing is a glass railing, and it's the requirement for alcohol beverage control that you have a 3-foot high railing to limit the ability for people to mingle around with alcohol. There were presentations about, or discussions about raising it to another higher level, but it never went forward, whether it was to address noise issues or the passing of alcohol. I think we were willing, subject to maybe, increasing the hours of operation out there to maybe 10 or 11. We were willing to raise that glass partition. There was a comment, I think, by staff that if we raise it too high, it becomes an enclosed patio, which... So.
All right, thank you.
So for staff, how high is too high?
I would say, honestly, if it gets higher than 5 feet, I think you're going to start to enclose the space because there is an awning over the top, and it kind of defeats the purpose of outdoor dining. And so I know the Planning Commission looked at this issue quite considerably. I think from both perspectives, one, to provide an adequate barrier and also to potentially mitigate any noise that might come off of that. Ultimately, the Commission felt that 36 inches was acceptable, however, with the limitation on alcohol sales that they added. I wanted to point out one item that there was a comment that this would be a bar, and there are conditions that specifically prohibit a bar. And I can go through the conditions. There's a handful of them that really, at least in the zoning administrator's mind and the Commission's mind, really kind of help mitigate a lot of the issues. There's no live entertainment. Quarterly gross sales have to be equal or exceed alcohol sales for food sales. We close the outdoor patio. I'm not trying to be an advocate for the applicant. I just want to make sure everyone realizes we've considered this really as a restaurant and not as a bar. And if there's any questions about the conditions, I'd be happy to go through them.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Mr. Reese.
Mayor and council members, my name is Joe Reese, and I live on 30th Street. My residence actually backs up to the shopping center here. I've had a number of meetings with Sean Wisman from Catellus and with Steve Geary from Kroburger. Myself and other residents have met with them. And originally the business was going to be open till midnight. They talked about keeping it to midnight. Through discussions with us and through concerns that we had expressed to them, they've made a number of changes, which include the hours. And I attended the zoning administrator hearing, and I spoke at that hearing, and myself and other residents agreed with what the zoning administrator came up with. We were surprised at the changes that occurred at Planning Commission. We didn't understand the 8 o'clock. To be honest with you, I go to dinner at 7:30 on Friday nights, and it seems unusual at 8 o'clock that I wouldn't be able to sit on that patio anymore to have a beer, with my burger. So I was very confused by that, especially when later at the same Planning Commission meeting, they agreed to expand Malarkey's patio area to 11 p.m., and it's a 786 square foot patio. So I just couldn't understand the difference between the two. That's going to have a greater impact on 30th Street than the Kroburger ever would. I think that in meeting with Steve Geary and meeting with Sean from Catellus, this is a positive thing for our community. It's going to help, I hope, be a contagious thing that spreads throughout the area, where we have more upscale restaurants that come into the area that clean up our area, which we all have been trying to do for quite some time. And I see this as a positive restaurant for us, and I ask that you go along with the zoning administrator and what the recommendations were of the zoning administrator. And I think that everyone, us and Steve Geary, will be happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Hello, I'm Barbara Chambers, and I, with my husband, we reside at 123 31st Street. And the thought of people sitting out on the patio across the street from us till 11 o'clock at night, it's drinking, it's really too much. The noise, this is our home. So I really ask you not, to limit the time. It's gotten very bad. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment on this? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to council for a motion and further discussion. Do we have a motion?
Well, why don't we have a little discussion first, if you don't mind? Or at least, I'd like to make a couple points before I make a motion.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, I asked that this be brought up on appeal, and several points here were already made, but I'll just reiterate them. This is not a bar. It is a restaurant. I've also frequented Mr. Geary's operation down in Corona Del Mar, and he does run a very high-class operation, high-class clientele there. His restaurant is only going to be open until 11, and most bars, they don't get started until 11, so it's clearly not a bar. As far as Mr. Schroeder's point about, people parking in the lot and then leaving, and Rudy's, I understand that as well, but, it was a retail center before, it's going to be a retail center after, and if Rudy's people were going to park there now, they were parking there before, and I don't think that's really going to change much. So I don't really see that as a factor in Mr. Geary's operation either. The police recommended 10 o'clock, and I think that they're ultimately the ones that are going to have to deal with the problems if there are any generated from there, and I trust that their recommendation is a good one. And I also appreciate Mr. Reese's points here as well, that it seems a little incongruous that we'd approve, or the Planning Commission would approve 11 o'clock at Malarkey's, which has been a bar all these years, although I understand that they'd like to upgrade their operation as well, and we applaud their efforts, till 11 o'clock. So I'm willing to support the zoning administrator's 10 o'clock recommendation, and I would make that
Motion?
the motion. Right.
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Would the city clerk read the necessary information here?
For item 10, there is a resolution number 2011-27, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach approving use permit number UP 2010-036 to allow a food service eating and drinking establishment with no late hours, a covered outdoor patio, and a Type 41 on-sale beer and wine eating place, alcoholic beverage control ABC license located at 3107 Newport Boulevard, PA 2010-155.
Okay. Do we have further comment? Councilmember Curry.
Well, just to say, these are always difficult situations. You have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. But I think here, I think a good case has been made for 10 o'clock, and I think, we cannot at one point say that we want to support the economic revitalization of the peninsula, and at the same point put conditions on it that don't make economic sense for the owners or that facilitate economic growth and revitalization. We would put the operator in a position where half the seats in his restaurant, somebody could not order beer or wine during the heart of dinner hour. And that just is, I think, is untenable and unfair to the operator. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, I would thank the Landing for investing in Newport Beach and for your efforts to revitalize this area. It's really coming along nicely, so thank you. And I think that the zoning administrator got this decision right, so thank you.
Councilmember Hill.
I would just like to acknowledge that I understand completely the issues in this area. I have a building at 22nd Street and West Balboa Boulevard, 6 apartments and commercial space, and we have had to step over the drunks on the sidewalk to access the apartment doors at times. I think these items are dealt with by an upgrade of the clientele that our facilities, that our investments in the area bring, and I look at this as a significant improvement in investment. I look at it as a restaurant, not as a bar. And I think that the motion is very supportable, and I will be supporting it.
Okay, well, this is my district, and I, too, am sensitive to the issues here with regard to alcohol prevalence on the peninsula. I'm also sensitive, though, as Councilmember Hill pointed out, that the long-run solution of that is to revitalize the peninsula with businesses that we would like to have there that attract a higher level, a less raucous crowd, if you will. It's very clear that this is a restaurant and not a bar. And so with all of that and the need to walk the line here between revitalization and sensitivity to the residents, I, too, will be supporting the motion to allow alcohol service until 10 p.m. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
One comment I forgot to make was that there are also 74 conditions placed on the operation of this hamburger place. And certainly we should be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve in 74 conditions.
Okay. Any further comments from council? Please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Thank you very much. On to current business. Item number 11, Special Events Administrative Policy. Do we have a staff report?
Mr. Mayor, I do have Tara Finnegan ready to go with a brief presentation, and you've heard part of this before already. This is our new strategy / policy and plan for bringing all special event waivers and requests to you together at once. I'll let you know that you did hear this in study session. Since that time, we invited everyone whom we know of that's asked for waivers or otherwise to a workshop. We held that on Friday. I think it was very helpful to us and to them. What we're asking for tonight is just additional direction on that, because it is an administrative policy. It's one that I will follow, the city staff will follow, based on your guidance. It's not something you formally adopt. And then secondly, we are asking you to consider a different fee schedule, which I hope is good news to everybody that does a special event. That's on page 9, handwritten page 9 of your staff report. And this reflects the guidance we got last time to really just focus on direct costs of things instead of the fully loaded costs. So with that, I'll have Tara make a brief presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. And as Dave said, we did come to you at your last meeting, your study session, with this proposal. Since then, we've done some additional work based upon your comments. I'll quickly go over the background and the process itself for those watching that aren't familiar, that weren't able to watch the last study session, and then we'll get into the changes and how we propose to move forward. Our past practice, as the council is aware, is that the city, for a number of years, has supported local community events through either in-kind or financial support. We handled each request individually. Each department responded directly and independently. We had grants, sponsorships, and waivers, and some of our groups received some, all, or nothing. Our proposed practice is to centralize that process, to contain the cost for us and for the event organizers, and to really continue this event support. The proposed process mirrors the community development block grant proposal process, in that there's one annual funding cycle. All applications for support would be due on the same day, and they'd all be reviewed at the same time. All requests would also then be reviewed and approved by the City Council. The details, we'd have a call for applications and a very firm deadline, and then we're going to ask the Special Events Advisory Committee to take on an expanded scope. And rather than having that council-appointed committee only review large events, those requesting $20,000 of support and over, we're going to ask them to review all of the applications we receive. They're going to review those based upon the set criteria that's contained in your staff report, and that's also available online. And they're going to pass the list of recommendations onto a small staff committee that will assign funding to each of their recommended events. We're going to divide a pot of money, if you will, that the city manager provides to us for the next budget year. And then we'll take that list and pass it on to the council for your review, amendment, or approval. The key changes, of course, is that there wouldn't be waivers of support to events without council approval, except, as noted last time, if a new event comes up, council could, of course, throughout the calendar year, or budget year, review and approve that request. We would have reduced hourly rates for the city staff time charged to the events. And we would also estimate all event costs up front and give the event organizers time to either work with us to reduce those costs or to submit their application for support. Since your study session, as Dave indicated, we did meet. We notified our event organizers. We met with about 20 of them last week. Admin Services helped us to further develop some of those fee changes that are contained in your report. And we deleted the two proposed criterion that were of most concern to the council, and that was that the event must be principally held within city limits and that a set percentage of the proceeds should go to a nonprofit. Again, just another look at some of those fee changes and why our event organizers were very happy on Friday when they saw the list. Significant reductions in some of them. If you agree with the process we're following, we would begin immediately. Tomorrow we'd have those applications available for our event organizers. We would ask for them to be due no later than April 15th, a Friday, at 5 o'clock. Then we would ask the Special Events Advisory Committee to begin its work, reviewing those applications and putting forth the list of recommendations. The staff committee would then assign some funding levels, and we'd bring that back to the council in concert with the annual budget approval cycle in late May and June. Our next steps would be to publicize and open that application process, and then actually to return to the council at your next meeting with a revised Special Event Advisory Committee scope, again, to expand it to review all events. We're also recommending, the police chief agrees, that we would add a police department representative to that committee to serve in an advisory capacity, and we'd also reassign the staff liaison role on the committee. And that concludes my report.
Okay. Questions for Tara? Councilmember Curry?
Well, first of all, I think a couple things. I think the new fee schedule for costs for police services is going to be very, very well received, and I think it tells the organizations that put these events on, we've been listening to them and trying to reduce the costs for having these events and doing them in our city, and I think that's going to be a real big benefit. I appreciate the changes that have been made to the criteria. I think those are very appropriate. The one thing I would note here is we have a criteria that says the event should benefit a Newport Beach or Orange County-based charitable organization. I'm not sure that all events are, by nature, beneficiary for a charity, for example, the film festival. So perhaps we should change this to say that if the event is charitable in nature, it should benefit a Newport Beach or Orange County-based charitable organization. And with that minor change, I'm certainly fine with the staff recommendation.
Okay, Councilmember Selledge.
Yeah, I'd support the change that Councilman Curry just mentioned.
All right, Councilmember Hill.
I was curious where the 25% came from on the city support should represent no more than 25%. I'm not opposed to it or supportive of it. I'm just curious as to how that number was picked.
That was a minor reduction. The criteria that you have in front of you were essentially the criteria that the Special Events Advisory Committee followed for the last 2 years. We made some minor changes, and one of them was they had recommended a 30% level, and we just reduced that to 25% level. So that a quarter of the overall event budget would be from the city. I think the idea behind that when they first developed it was that the city wouldn't, the event wouldn't be wholly dependent upon the city for its support, that it could go on without us.
Okay. I had a question. It's on the subject, but not quite on point. I noticed that we had our annual Persian celebration at Corona Del Mar State Beach that's been going on, I think, for quite some time here in the city, and it's generally a very happy celebration, well-behaved and well-conducted. On the other hand, I did notice that 15 police officers were required to support that because of the crowds and perhaps other city personnel. And so, as a matter of instruction for me, did this event go through any sort of an approval process, and would it be an event going forward that should be considered by SEAC, even though they may not be asking for any direct subsidy? Apparently they got a subsidy in effect with the amount of police support that was required.
Well, we do charge them parking. And there's almost no park. I'm not answering your question entirely. I will in just a moment. But usually we would not have that parking booth staffed on Nowruz, which is Persian New Year, but we do staff it for that night because we know when it occurs. This group has not been one that's ever come to us for a special event permit. It's a bit ambiguous in terms of who its organization is. In fact, we tried to communicate with them when we closed Big Corona for a year and a half for construction and tried to move them, and it's more just a gathering that occurs based on the timing. So arguably, I would bet it's a wash with the parking revenue. It would be nice to get them into this process, but I don't think we can.
So everybody knows it's a party and they just come and have a good time.
Yeah, and they're fairly orderly. It's not
I know
really raucous, but yeah, you know when the date is, and Corona Del Mar is an easy beach to come to.
It's kind of like 4th of July on the peninsula.
Yeah,
people
right.
show up. It'd be great if we could
charge parking for that.
Can we get a permit for 4th of July on the peninsula?
Only a lot better behaved.
Yeah. I did hear anecdotally from friends of mine that live right up the block, and the neighborhood's just parked up. I mean, I would imagine that parking lot was full.
Yeah, and you don't want to be anywhere in Marguerite and Coast Highway that night when the real draw is coming in, because it's a huge jam. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The next day I saw the paper. Oh.
Yeah.
They don't make a lot of noise once they get off the beach, certainly.
Yeah, my concern wasn't so much for the event, but as to how it fits with the policy that we're talking about here. So I guess if you don't have an organization, you can't be subject to the policy.
If we can't find you, yeah, right.
That's probably good for a lot of things. So with that, we'll open it for public comment. Does anyone wish to make a comment on this agenda item? Okay. Bring it back to council. I don't believe we need a motion on this item. You were looking for staff or for council direction. Do you feel like you have it?
I don't think there'll be any objection to point number 2. So actually, if you moved especially recommendation number 2, then we'll put that into the master fee schedule.
All right.
Move the item or recommendation of number 2.
Second it.
All right. We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Councilmember Curry, did
No,
you have something?
that includes the changes to the criteria that we talked about. Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. On to agenda item number 12, memorandum of agreement with the Port of Long Beach for the Rhine Channel contaminated sediment cleanup project.
So, Mr. Mayor and council members, this is we've talked about this before. It's an important item. This is an important agreement. It involves a long-awaited opportunity to put sediment not suitable for beach disposal into the Port of Long Beach. And I'll have Chris Miller, our Harbor Resources Manager, tell you a little bit more about that. Although you know a lot about it, so it may be a short presentation.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. My name is Chris Miller, Harbor Resources Manager. Really, I'll just give a few brief thoughts here. I don't have a presentation for the slideshow, but just want to emphasize that this is if the council approves this memorandum of agreement, it'd be a milestone for the city of Newport Beach. It's one of the bigger milestones. There are several more to occur, but the Port of Long Beach is anxious for us to sign this so that they can in turn finish their planning. We're the very first people to be in the Port of Long Beach, so we're precedent setting for the project, which is another big deal for us. How smoothly our process goes will dictate how smoothly the rest of their process or project goes. So all of our ducks are in a row, so to speak. We've planned, and I anticipate that this project will be successful. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions for Chris? Councilmember Curry, I guess you get your button first. No, Councilmember Pro Tem Gardner.
I know that at the Harbor Commission meetings, we've talked about the possibility that there are other people in line, but some of them may be dropping out. Have we heard anything yet? Because that would give us an opportunity to dispose of even more stuff.
Nothing official yet. There's been talk that some other the folks who are interested in putting their sediment in the ports or in the Port of Long Beach may not be able to come up with the quantities that they anticipated a year ago. That's to be determined officially soon. And once that is determined, that may provide us an opportunity to dispose of other material in the lower bay in the Port of Long Beach, assuming some other criteria can be met.
Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reading the report, I noticed that under the project status, it notes that the staff is working with the State Lands Commission to obtain approval for the use of Tideland funds on this project as required by the city Tidelands grant. Who's in control of those funds? I mean, are those funds in our bank and we need to get their approval to expend them, or are they in their bank? And I thought those were part of our general fund and we were totally flexible.
Tideland funds we hold Tideland funds, but we hold them in trust for the benefit of the state. If there's a project within the Tidelands in which we're going to utilize Tidelands funds, then we have to get approval of the Tidelands, the State Lands Commission, if we're to spend over $250,000. We're working with them on the issue because there's some ambiguity as it exists as to how much of any of this necessarily would be Tidelands or not Tidelands, and we're working with the State Lands Commission to iron out those issues.
And are we at risk of not being able to use Tideland funds?
One would think so, based upon the comments by the State Lands Commission, but I believe we're going to work this out. I think this is largely going to resolve itself.
And if we aren't able to access them, we have other funds that we would use?
We do. This is a top priority to do and do now.
Okay. I also appreciated the negotiations comment of a take it or leave it type of agreement with the Port Authority. And then when I got back to section 11 and 12, in the cost and expense and in the reps and warrants, I noticed that in the cost of expense, I mean, we don't even get an out for delays by act of God. And in the reps and warrants, there's not even to the best of the city's knowledge. It's an absolute statement. Is our benefit from this such that taking on these kinds of risks are mitigated from the overall benefit of being able to access the port? How are
Yes.
how are we dealing with these higher than normal risks that would be in an agreement that we would otherwise negotiate?
One, that we're insuring on these risks with respect to the different issues relating to this operation. But secondly, the benefits of going to the Port of Long Beach is pretty tremendous for us because of the disposal of this material. And in going through it, it's been a determination from staff's standpoint that in spite of the fact that we didn't have a lot of room to negotiate, read none, we felt it was worth the risk based upon the situation. It may not be normally the type of contract we would recommend, but in this situation, we felt it was an acceptable risk.
Thank you.
Councilmember Selich?
Dave, when we set aside the reserves for this project, I don't recall that we set aside a percentage coming from tidelands and a percentage coming from other sources. So was the idea that we would seek as much out of tidelands and the rest would come out of the rest of the general fund?
Yes.
I actually have a further thought on that. It seems to me that this ought to be represented as a loan from the general fund to the Tidelands Fund, so that it becomes an obligation of the Tidelands Fund, and that future revenues from Tidelands would be available over time to repay the general fund for this expenditure. I know we had some conversation about that at one time, and this is in the Tidelands, that's for sure. And we do have a Tidelands master plan that we need to put together here, including dedication of funding sources and that sort of thing. And it seems to me that that would be the better way to go, to represent the general fund expenditure as a loan to the Tidelands Fund that could then be considered a Tidelands use. Since we're going to go to state lands anyway to get approval of it, why not?
You're right. That's a path we could take and probably should take. I guess I never looked at the logistics of a loan from one to the other. I just assumed this was a project that's reimbursable within the Tidelands Management Program once that's developed. In other words, we're fronting this with the expectation that other revenues would cover it and reimburse it. So if there's a better mechanism to do that, we'll do that.
But I would like to have a clear mechanism by which the general fund gets reimbursed over time.
So, David, maybe we'd do a resolution.
Right, we could document it as potentially an express loan from the general fund to the Tidelands Fund. And then, once we've worked out the details with the State Lands Commission, then we could confirm the ability for reimbursement. I haven't looked at exactly that issue or considered that particular aspect, but I don't see any reason sitting here right now why we couldn't do that.
Well, then I'd like you to study it carefully, and if appropriate, come back then to council with an item for that we can talk about and make sure we have a good, careful understanding of. Okay? Councilmember Daigle?
Well, I think part of our acceptance into the Port of Long Beach was that our sediment has the right chemistry, and then also really a credit to our staff and team of consultants that we had our permits in order, and we demonstrated that we can perform. So thanks for your help there. And I remember several years ago talking to Colonel Magnus. He was the district commander for the Corps. He got an awful lot done here, and I said to him, I said, our community has been wringing our hands for 70 years on how to dredge this harbor. Can you give us some simple guidance? And what he had to say is, you can't move sediment until you have a disposal site. So our efforts over the years, we did many studies, and we had a careful evaluation of the various options, and I think we've come up with something that's cost effective. So thanks for your work on that.
And if we mind our P's and Q's and our very good little boys and girls, we'll be okay under the contract and maybe even be able to put some more stuff in that hole. All right, any more comments from council? Councilwoman Daigle, did you? Okay. Do we have comments from the public on this item? Well, okay. Bring it back to council.
As you consider a vote, council members, I wanted to also thank Chris Miller and Public Works staff for placing the emphasis that this project needed. And as Councilmember Daigle noted, it's a real accomplishment. It's an accomplishment on your part to dedicate the funds for it. And I sure appreciate Chris and Public Works' work in meeting this deadline. We're not done yet, but we're mighty close.
Councilmember Rosansky?
Just comment that I can recall a conversation probably about 5 or 6 years ago, right on this dais here, where former Councilman Nichols asked, why would we ever be doing anything with this? And I told him at that time, I said, we will someday clean this up, and today is the day. So with that, I'll leave it to Leslie to make the motion since she worked so hard on this.
I would like to move the action as recommended by staff, and then also to look into explore the path recommended by the mayor.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further comment? Please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, this is a red letter day for the city of Newport Beach. This is just great. Okay, now then, we are going to move on to item number 13, which is the amendment of the Newport Beach Municipal Code regarding leaf blowers.
So, Mr. Mayor and council members, this is returning to you since November 9th of 2010. And we have a proposed ordinance, which I imagine the clerk will want to read here shortly. As we present that to you, and I'm going to ask Rob to go through a really brief presentation, I want to acknowledge something I've acknowledged to you verbally, that I'm not sure if we got your direction exactly quite right from November to now, and I take the blame for that. But I also know this is a challenging issue, and we have a new council member. The poor soul now has to weigh in on this tough issue. But we welcome your input and your thoughts as we make the presentation. Rob Houston, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you have an ordinance number 2011-12, an amendment to the Newport Beach Municipal Code that would ban the use of gas-powered leaf blowers in residential neighborhoods. Just as a brief review, in September of last year, a survey was completed. It asked the question, should there be a ban on gasoline-powered leaf blowers in residential neighborhoods? The response for resident homeowner associations was 69% yes. For landscape companies, 16% yes. For residents and business owners, 71% yes. There was a discussion, as was mentioned, at the study session November 9th, wide-ranging discussion, many items in the area of leaf blowers covered, including reasons for a ban, be it pollution, dust, or noise, areas to have a ban, be it residential areas, commercial, civic properties, or the entire city. Discussion also occurred on types of equipment, be it all leaf blowers or just gas-powered ones, and the idea of having an allowance for HOAs to opt out of a ban. As that discussion happened, staff then prepared a proposed ordinance before you that tried to take that direction and put it into words. So before you, you have an ordinance that contains a citywide ban on gas-powered leaf blowers in residential areas only. It has an option for homeowner associations to opt out of the citywide ban. It has a phase-in period of 6 months before the ban takes effect. The ordinance does not apply to electric leaf blowers or vacuums. It does not apply to commercial areas, city parks, or medians. That's tried to be a quick report. That puts the amendment back for council's review discussion.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
This spent some time at EQUAC, and one of the things, it's not just the noise. It's, for many people, it's the fact that it's kicking up all the dust and the pollen and the allergens and everything. And I don't think that by just limiting it to gas-powered leaf blowers, I don't think we deal with that issue. I'm also reminded of a story that Mark Harmon told about when they went to electric blowers in Claremont, that they had to get generators. And the generators were the cheapest generators they can find, were noisier and more polluting than the gas blowers. So I would think that if we are going to pass this, it should be both gas and electric leaf blowers. It shouldn't include vacuums, because vacuums do avoid many of the blowing well, they don't blow at all. They suck it up, so you don't have people with their allergies having the problems that they have with the vacuum. I know there's been some concern about, well, is it hypocritical that the city can do it, but maybe an individual can't? I say the one advantage, it's the same advantage perhaps that homeowners associations have if they decide not to opt out. I mean, if they decide to opt out, is that when you've got one entity, you can control it. You can say, okay, we're going to do it at these hours, and that sort of thing, which you can't. I mean, one of the biggest arguments we get, complaints, is not, if all of them came at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning and we're done by 9:30, probably we wouldn't be here, but it's that they come at 9:30 on Wednesday and then maybe at 11 and then on Friday, and some people feel like by the time you get a couple houses on the side, across the street and in back of you, you can have something every day or all day or something. So I do think that when you have the single entity, you do have a control, and while it's not ideal, of course, to be able to do some things that you say your residents can't, you can make it less onerous on the people surrounding you because you can control the time, and even you can make real recommendations and stringent recommendations as to the type of machinery. That has to be new, it has to meet the decibel standards and everything. You can do that with a single entity in a way that you cannot do it with individual residents. Palo Alto, there was a reference to Palo Alto, how unsuccessful the program had been up there. That's because Palo Alto tried to do it by noise, and you had to meet a certain decibel level. Well, you can't enforce something like that, but you can if at the city level. We can certainly say we're going to have our people use this kind of machine, and it's going to be quieter and everything. So I don't know that that would be a disqualifier. So I'm going to be supportive of this.
Councilmember Curry.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, we received a communication today from the Outdoor Power Equipment Institute, who asserts that they are the international trade association representing the manufacturers of lawn and garden equipment. And they make the argument that the Federal Clean Air Act preempts us from taking the proposed action tonight. Do you have an opinion about that?
I have the beginnings of an opinion about that. We received that letter at about 4:15 today. Their argument related to the Clean Air Act really presupposes that what we're doing is regulating emissions of gas leaf blowers. But the reality is what the council has done, and what I believe basically our record shows, is that you're not addressing emissions. That wasn't your intent. You were addressing noise and secondary effects of leaf blowers. That, in fact, the goal was not simply to affect emissions, but more to address the noise and the blown dust, et cetera, which is not an emission from a gas-powered engine. There is case law, however, that we've reviewed that deals with the question of whether or not the intertwining of reasons based upon the legislative record includes a portion being the regulation of emissions. My take on it is this. In the 2 hours or so that we had the opportunity to research the position taken by the Trade Association, is that my recommendation is for the council to proceed forward with an approach as it feels is appropriate. It would be if you chose to take any action tonight in whatever form you make that choice, that this is first reading if you go forward. Then we will complete further research on the issue before second reading and be more solid and have a different recommendation for you. Getting this type of late notices, I'd rather not throw off the council's action, and I think a full discussion is warranted tonight. But I would like to make it clear for the record from my recollection of these discussions that we're predominantly addressing noise and blown debris not emitted carcinogens or whatever else might come from a gasoline-powered engine. That was what the underlying purpose, I think, was what generated this approach.
That certainly summarizes my view of this. I will tell you, I'm least of all concerned about the emissions of these machines, and much more concerned about blown debris and pollutants and the noise. And for that reason, I support Councilmember Gardner's assertion that the electric blowers also ought to be included. However, I do live on the peninsula. We've just had a pretty solid demonstration of what blown sand can do. It's still all over the place down there, despite the manful efforts of our municipal operations department. But in any event, with regard to the electric, I would like to include it in the ban, but allow for an exception for resident-operated electric blowers to be used for people who are seniors, that is, for 65 and older or otherwise handicapped, and need to have that ability, especially for places like the beach. So that would be my desire, just as a point of clarification here. Do we have other comments from council? Councilmember Daigle?
I look forward to hiring a senior to do my property, but anyhow.
Well, no, I said resident operated.
Yeah, well.
Resident operated.
I'll invite my aunt or something out. Yeah, there you go. My concern has to do with the opt-in.
I'm a senior.
Or the opt-in.
What will you pay?
I'd prefer to trade services.
Sorry.
As far as the opt-in or the opt-out, I think that kind of is the difference between big government and more limited government, and I certainly favor more limited government. And it seems to me we have homeowners associations, they have governance that, and they have the ability to impose a ban, and some have, and some have not. And they certainly have the ability to enforce, their bans or whatever's going on in their HOA. And so coming from a part of the city which is a little newer area, modern communities, lots of HOAs, some gate guarded, I would prefer to have the opt-in, which is that, if they want to have a ban, they can, as they do now, versus, well, we're going to have a ban, and then if you want to undo it, you can. And this sort of the activity that's connected with that. So my preference would be for the opt-in, which I think, there's some discussion about whether or not that was the original intent, but certainly at this stage I would prefer an opt-in provision.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner?
I thought about that because I know that I saw Councilman Selich's email expressing a similar desire, but it seems to me that the opt-out is simple enough. My concern about an opt-in is simply that it's very easy just to ignore it. I mean, if you have to opt in, why even tell your residents about it? Let's just say, this is easy, let's just go with what we've got. Whereas if it's opt-out, you're going to have to do some communication, and if your residents don't want to do it, fine. I don't know that it's so onerous, but I also was interested, staff responded that it was more efficient to do an opt-out. Was that correct? Oh, you had an email.
I did, and I was the one who brought up the opt-in at the last study session, and my goal was similar to what Councilmember Daigle was indicating, is in order to try and streamline the process. But staff, as it worked on the ordinance, I think came up with the right recommendation from an enforcement standpoint, that if we are going to go forward and enforce something like this, we would have a clear record of who's in and who's out if we go through an opt-out approach as opposed to an opt-in. And I'm not trying to suggest that we want to do excessive regulation. I'm just saying that if we have to enforce, we would then get a clear record from an opt-out approach, because then we would know who's not out. I mean, not in. Oh, God.
So how would that be any clearer than going the other way? I mean,
well, the thing is,
I don't get that.
and I look at it with respect to it, is that we'd have to research everything and determine who's in associations that have enforceable CC&Rs. And I use the hypothetical that there's someone in the heights above Corona del Mar, and we get a phone call that says, come enforce on a leaf blower issue, and we don't know if that's an enforceable association or not, and if they've opted in or not. But if we have in code enforcement a situation where we know we enforce in the entire city, but then we accept out areas, Big Canyon or whoever else tells us to get out, we'll know then what their boundaries are, and we'll have clarity, and we won't have to research based upon every single complaint we get to come deal with. That's my approach, and I'm just looking for simplicity from an enforcement standpoint.
I just don't see that either way. You're going to have to do the research on the association, whether they have the authority or not.
But if we go
Whether they're in or
opt-out,
not.
we can tell the association, when you opt out, you need to just provide us a copy of your CC&Rs and your letter, and then we have the research largely done for us, and we don't do a lot of different research physically to be sure that they've done what they say they did. We get a copy of the resolution and a certified copy by their secretary indicating their action was taken. To me, it's a cleaner record.
I think you're making more of it than there is.
Councilmember Curry?
Or, excuse me, Councilmember Hill.
Well, I suppose the fact that you're waiting for my comments, my best thing to do would be just to turn my button off and keep quiet. I guess I'll have to just start from a philosophy. I hate blowers. They just drive us crazy in our house, and in other places that we've lived, we've had the same problem. And so the question is, what can you do about them and treat it fairly and be effective? Because there are individuals that couldn't clean their yard at all if they didn't have some kind of device. And so I did appreciate Councilmember Gardner's comments about the city parks and the medians and commercial areas where you could put in regulations. And I guess my feeling overall is that we in fact need regulations on these. And that we ought to look at hours of operation for city activities or public activities or contractors that are servicing public areas, just as we have regulations for construction in the city as to what the hours are that construction can take place and the days and whether or not holidays can be utilized and these different types of things. And I do see a difference between the electric and the gas, the only difference being the sound. Everything else is pretty much equal. And so I don't have a problem of exempting out electric or exempting out electric for operator residents. I don't have a problem with that. But I think the problem is really complex, and the issues that have come before us over the last 2 or 3 days from these associations have raised another whole issue that at least I wasn't aware of the newest generation of the gas-powered blowers that supposedly have much lower emissions, supposedly are as quiet as the electrical ones. And so I'm wondering if we shouldn't learn more about that before we take some kind of final decision. Having said that, I have a couple of nits about the ordinance, the way it was drafted. And the final whereas on the bottom of page 4, to me is very vague. I didn't understand what that whereas meant until I got into the definitions of who was exempted in and who was exempted out. And so in just a simplistic, non-legalese method, I would rewrite that to say, whereas the City Council wishes to prohibit the use of gas-powered leaf blowers in all residential districts except small I by certain public employees and contractors acting in the scope of their employment, and small double I in residential common interest developments. Because to me it wasn't clear whether the residential common interest developments were prohibited or were part of the exempt area. And then the other nit that I had is in the use of leaf blowers under 3A, where you define the opt-out, if you will, it doesn't say how they do it. I mean, it seems to me that there needs to be a method for them to direct them as to what they would do. It just says that by their association rules and regulations choose to be exempt from the restrictions contained in this section. So what do? They just put it in their own minutes, or do they have to send a memo to the staff, or do they have to file a form? You know, how would they exercise that right? So those were the issues that I had with the resolution. I don't like leaf blowers. I vote against them. I would separate out electric, and I would probably be most in favor of learning more about what the new generation blowers have to offer.
Councilmember Curry?
Well, one of the hazards of making, law and regulation and legislation is that you actually have to live with it. And I think when we start thinking about how we implement this, we're going to run into some issues here. First of all, I think we ought to adopt it. I think the opt-in, opt-out only really works if it's an opt-out, because that way you have a specific action by a neighborhood taking themselves out. You don't have somebody running around going, who's talking for me here? We've got overlapping associations in some neighborhoods such as mine. Who's got jurisdiction on this? So let's have it as an opt-out. I think the city attorney's points on that were well taken in terms of actual implementation and enforcement. I don't have a problem personally with electric leaf blowers, and so I take them in, put them out. But I think we have a problem if we say you can have an electric leaf blower if you're 65 or over and it's Tuesday and you live on the beach or some other restriction. That just makes it a rule that nobody can really enforce. So I'd be in favor of, allowing electric leaf blowers and leaving the ordinance as it's written as it relates to gas blowers, allowing neighborhoods to opt out. And I think that gives us what people have asked for, because this is really a rule and an ordinance that's come to the council because neighborhoods, particularly in Corona Del Mar and some other areas of the city, have come to us and said, deal with this issue, give us the tools to deal with it. And I think we are doing that with this pretty well thought out and certainly long in gestation ordinance that's before us tonight.
Okay, Councilmember Gardner.
Just to address something that Councilman Hill was mentioning, EQAC did look at the ideas of various ways of trying to control this. And the issue is that we've got so many individuals that are doing yard work that to set a standard for you have to have this kind of model or something, how we would ever control that and monitor it and have them come in. I mean, it would just be a very expensive proposition for us. And so we looked at Laguna. Laguna has had this enforced. We talked to the city manager. He said it wasn't an issue. It seemed to work well for them. And that gave EQAC at least a lot of confidence in suggesting this come up to the council.
Okay, I had a couple comments. First off, I think we have something like 168 homeowner associations or 151. I mean, it's a huge number of associations, some of which have real authority and some of which don't. And so I'm in agreement with Councilmember Curry. The only way this can work reasonably well is for those associations to raise their hand and say, we want out of this ordinance, and then show that they have the ability to do that and enforce it. I don't see, I was in the opt-in category before. I now agree with the city attorney that this is certainly the better way administratively to do it. As it relates to the electric blowers, I actually own an electric blower. I bought it so that I could clean out my garage without having to use my hose, and I don't use it anymore. The darn thing is so loud, I can't stand using it myself. It's a very high-pitched, loud whine that they make. And so I've still got a problem with the noise of the electrics, and that's why I'd like to leave it in, although I'm willing to make the exception for people who have a real need, which would be over 65 and or handicapped, and you're the owner. You're not paying a gardener to do it. You're the owner of the house, and you're going to use it. So that's how I got to that answer, just for clarification. Do we have more comment at council? Otherwise, we should hear from the public. Yeah, Mark?
Thanks, Mayor Hanna. Just a couple of quick comments from a user, I guess, of the two different kinds of leaf blowers. First, to Mayor Pro Tem Gardner's comment, she's absolutely correct. We do now put in our agreements with the landscape contractors a decibel rating that they have to meet with the gas-powered leaf blowers. So it's absolutely correct. We do control that noise, where a lot of private gardeners might not use equipment that that is rated as such. So it is true there is a difference.
Do they use those new generation ones that those people have been talking to us about?
We use new generation electric, and I'll get to that in a minute. The gas ones that are used, we just put the decibel rating. We don't put the type of blower, gas blower, the maker model. So I don't know what the new generation is.
So what is the decibel? 65? Is that what you require?
It's under 65.
Under 65.
Yeah. And a lot of the leaf blowers that you're hearing used by, and not to put down their equipment, but used by the private gardeners, it's older equipment and it's well over that noise level. So Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Gardner is correct. On Mayor Henn's comment about the sand, that is also absolutely correct. We worked with AQMD to turn in our gas blowers. This was a couple of years ago, because when you turned in the gas blowers, they gave you free electric blowers. And these were the new age, super duper, electric blowers. And so we took them out there all proud that we were doing our green thing. And when we got these blowers out there, they wouldn't move sand off the boardwalk. I mean, you need the gas-powered units to move sand off the boardwalk, street ends, and other things. So we gave them back to AQMD and went back to the gas-powered. They don't blow any better or worse for older people, I think, and as far as enforcing, I think it would probably be better if we took areas of the city and allowed gas-powered blowers, because those areas, the street end areas, the boardwalk areas, without a gas-powered blower, you're not going to do much good. So I think that might be an option to look at, because this past weekend, as Mayor Henn knows, there's a tremendous amount of sand on the street ends, on the boardwalk, and there are a lot of people out there, residents out there with gas-powered blowers that are helping us get things cleaned up. So it's a big help.
Do you have hour limitations?
We do, and we have noise requirements at certain hours when we work in parks and on medians, so that's covered as well. My final comment has to do, I think it's to touch on Mayor Henn. With all due respect, I think any kind of leaf blower you start up in a garage might be real noisy. The electric blowers, certainly, because we've used both, are certainly much quieter. The problem I have with eliminating both kinds of blowers, the electric and the gas, is that there's no third option. And what we notice with street sweepers and road maintenance, we can tell those areas where gardeners do not use blowers. Either the residents have told them don't use them, the noise bothers us, because the trimmings are out in the street. They don't, the option without a blower is a broom. I mean, no one's going to, tow around a vacuum, a shop vacuum. It's usually done with a broom and a dustpan. And what happens is the trimmings, the grass, the hedge trimmings are usually just pushed off the property into the street. And we know those areas because we can see the stuff out in the street. So just from a user perspective, I'd like to give the gas blowers the boot and stick with the electric blowers, even if it's for 6 months, and see what impact eliminating the gas blowers has in the community. I think that might be a good option.
So you don't think that when people use a blower, it doesn't end up in the street?
No,
it just ends up more dispersed in the street.
No, absolutely not. No, if you watch a gardener with a blower, they will blow. They're pretty good with that stuff. I mean, they'll blow it off the sidewalk in the property, gets all the nooks and crannies around steps, around porches, gets all that stuff that would wash out with rainwater. They get that, and they blow it into a pile and put it then into the gunny sack or whatever they happen to be hauling away with it. They don't leave it in the street. We see it in the street because you've got a broom and a dustpan. Well, you're only going to do so much.
Put it in a gunny sack, just like you do.
Yeah, but sweep up a 300-foot frontage lot. I mean, you'd be sweeping for days. You better get a lot from that one house.
What about the issue, though, of power?
Well,
I mean, you say you're the one that told me about the experience in Claremont.
Yeah,
and the
I know.
fact that you were using generators.
I know. You ever say something that you... No, and that's absolutely true. When we did this in Claremont about 10 years ago, what happened was people were mounting these old generators on the back of pickups. But now, the new age of equipment, we have these rechargeable batteries you can put in an electric leaf blower, and it'll work for a couple of hours. They have charging stations you can put in a truck, charge the batteries, use different batteries. There's a way around the generators. Not to say some people might not do that, but technology's kind of caught up with that. You don't need the beat-up generator anymore. It's just some thoughts on as we move forward. I probably confused the issue.
Dave, did you have a gardener
Yeah.
in your Laguna place?
Yeah.
And did they...
I was telling Mayor Henn this morning on a recent bike ride down through the hills. There was blowers going all over the place in Laguna, and no one's paying any attention to it. So that's probably how they solved the problem, was just not enforcing it.
And just, if I may, on the Laguna issue, after we received this letter from the Trade Association, I called the city attorney for Laguna to say, hey, to find out if they've gotten any objections like this. He said, well, we don't really deal with that. I mean, it was adopted 15 years ago, and I never hear anything about it. So my impression is that well, certainly 15 years ago, the issues that we're talking about, the emissions and such, were not something that was regulated with preemption and stuff that we're facing now. So I don't know that Laguna is the best test for how things are moving forward here.
Well, I appreciate, Mark, your comments about electrics and whatnot, but they do still blow stuff around a lot, and there's no way around that. So, anyway, all right, any more council comments? Then let's hear from the public.
Good evening, Mayor Henn and council members. Leslie, I'm not going to apply for the job. I'm Carol Martin. I'm here to support the interest of the hobbyist gardener. One of the hobbies that we really do enjoy in this community is gardening. And it's a healthy recreational activity where we get exercise and we enjoy the results of our efforts. Hobbyist gardeners are very protective of our plants and would not utilize a leaf blower in the same manner as the professional laborer who arrives with his wand of power with a large volume to announce his arrival. It's a different technique, and there are situations where the leaf blower is an essential tool for gardening by older people. And I've had a lot of experience in the last few days with this. And yes, the sand can be blown with an electric leaf blower, all 6 feet of it. It takes more time because you have to let each layer dry out before you take the leaf blower back.
Carol, I have to say, I ran this morning, and the boardwalk in front of your home was absolutely whistle clean.
Wasn't it? You didn't look at the sides of it, though, did you? That's still waiting to dry out. Okay, from the survey responses of the survey that you commissioned, it really does not appear that the request for abandoning leaf blowers was aimed at the senior citizen homeowner whose recreational hobby is gardening. And I would therefore want to encourage you to exempt the senior citizen resident who tend their own yards, in addition to exempting the homeowners associations, the parks, and the public employees. We really do try to be responsible. We try to do our best, and I hope we're not offensive. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. W.R. Dilding. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Gardner, your comment about generators. That was one of the things that I wanted to address. But first, if I may, in the staff report, it refers to there would be a phase-in period of 6 months before the ban takes effect. Should that not be included in the ordinance? In other words, how are people going to know? I came here primarily tonight to address the electric aspect. I have a combination 2.5-gallon vacuum blower. When I went out after a week in Arizona, came home and saw what was out there, I could not use my vacuum. I don't think I could have carried it. It's much lighter than the handheld electric blower. It makes the same noise when I clean my car or do any other work. I hook it up to when I sand, I hook it up to that. The biggest concern I have on larger parcels of land here, I lived for 40-some years on an acre of land. If I didn't have a gas-powered blower, I don't know what I'd do, is the extension cords and the availability of power on our houses, commercial power. The code has changed over the years. Most houses, unless the architect was kind enough to realize that people use power all around the house, they're on the front and the back. And I think there are, your comment about the gas-driven generators, they're going to run longer than a typical leaf blower. Having been in the construction business, I've seen, and my people have too, because excessive requirement for extension cords, run the generator 8 hours. I'm buying the gas, not them. And it's just to have shorter cords. My suggestion I discussed with the building official today on these older homes is because you have a 6-month phase-in period, that the first 5 months that the city waiver the fee for an electrical permit and outlet, which is probably be anywhere from $40 to $50. That first month on the job, if he has the landscaper has an electric blower and realizes the trouble of pulling a cord around, you've all pulled a 100-foot garden hose, electrical cord 100-foot long, to save your equipment because of voltage drop and the low voltage that we do have in the city. I haven't had 120 volts in my house all day today, which is supposed to be supplied. That waiver that fee, and then the building department inspect them that 6th month, not go out when somebody calls in that they're completed. And it's a safety item for people, but I guarantee you with the electric blowers on larger parcels, you're going to have the contractor have a generator in the back of his truck. It's going to run for longer than it would with his backpack. And the other thing is, you can, and there are available now, small generators look like Electrolux vacuum cleaner that you could carry around, allow them. If a non-commercial power is used, put a stipulation in there that they have a generator of a low dB, whatever you want to set it at, or whatever's commercially available. But I think the ordinance is fantastic, and I do support it and recommend that consideration be given for those people in the first 5 months to waiver the fee, order it over the internet, not much of a problem, and make it electric more pleasant, not use a lot of generators. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Claudia Gray. I live in the Bonita Canyon community, and this is my first council meeting, and you can see how important this must be to me to come to this. I've been living in my house for 11 years right now, and starting last year, I'm almost to the point that I want to move. It's unbearable. In my community, not just because I don't have a gardener, I enjoy doing the work. I think myself and my next-door neighbor were the only ones without gardeners. And starting in the morning by about 7:15, it starts, and it doesn't stop. It does not stop. I know that they must be loud because not only do I hear them on my street, which you could almost imagine that you would, you hear them on the next street, and not just backing up to my backyard with the people across the street. That's how busy they must be. I know that there are some very professional gardeners that come. They have their names on the truck, and they have a very shiny truck, and everyone is very cool. But then there are the gardeners that come in on 3 wheels, and probably those are that's the very old equipment that's very loud and noisy. But I'm actually dreading this spring and summer because I know that it'll be impossible to enjoy your patio. Last year, I remember when it got warm, we would just go around and start shutting windows. And that's just not a way to live in the community. I don't know if my area is worse than the others, maybe because the houses are so close together, but it's unbearable. And like the one man said about the noise in the bar, boy, oh boy, if anyone would like to see it, just come to my house at 9 Westridge. You have to be there to imagine it. And now that it's daylight savings time, just a couple of days ago, it was already 20 to 6, and it was still going. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Please vote yes.
No begging.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Karen Tringali, Corona Del Mar. You're aware that we've done a number of surveys of both our residents and our members on this issue, and overwhelmingly, people support restrictions and bans on the equipment, so I won't go back over that. But I guess I just want to reiterate that there are really three issues that were identified by the respondents to our surveys. Noise was only one. It was the particulate pollution and then the debris that ultimately ends up and impacts our bay and our water quality. And so while electric blowers might help with one of those components, it certainly doesn't do anything to really alleviate the particulate pollution nor the debris that goes into our bay. Therefore, really a full ban would work towards solving all those issues. When our construction crews are around, they're required to block off drains to prevent construction material from going into our drains in the bay, but we don't really have anything like that when it comes to gardeners. And we've actually called code enforcement a number of times because of the debris that was blown directly into the street, directly toward the drain. So it may not happen everywhere all the time, but it does happen. So again, the Residents Association has supported this ban and would encourage you to vote for the ban. Thank you.
Hello, Christine Carr. I live in Newport Beach, have for a long, long time. First of all, my request is to ban all blowers of all kinds. And it's been going on for so long. I mean, I'm here, I live in the Heights, but so many of my neighbors, they were so happy that I was coming because everybody talks about it. Even with the city, with the blowers, the dogs get scared. I mean, that's a whole nother thing, but at least residential gardeners need to stop it. I mean, I've stopped it. Actually, I have one house, I'm in my house, but the gardeners next door to, on both sides, they do not blow over to my house. I've actually offered to pay extra, and I have, for them not to, because if you have the windows open and they're blowing from one side, then the next day they're blowing from the other side, and then the next day the house behind, they're blowing that way. It goes all over the cars. It's just insane. And everybody's afraid to take a stand. Why don't we just take a stand, keep it simple, stop them? Why do we have to keep going on and on? It'll probably come up in 6 months anyway again, but please consider stop them. Thank you.
My name is Larry Tucker, and I'm here on behalf of Big Canyon Country Club. And I really have more technical questions and comments concerning the language itself that's in the ordinance. So if you would go to section B3 of the proposed ordinance, it states use of gas-powered leaf blowers in residential districts prohibited. Gas-powered leaf blowers shall not be used in any district identified in Title 20 of this code as a district zone for residential use. My first question is, Big Canyon is a planned community. It's a residential PC, but not every planning area in the planned community can be used for residential uses. So it's a little confusing to me as to whether this applies at all to Big Canyon Country Club, which has land that's not zoned for residential, but's in a residential PC. It's in a district that's identified as a district for residential use, but not every planning area within that district can be used for residential purposes. So I'm not sure whether we're included in this or excluded. Now, I believe the intention was to exclude us because there's a carve-out, an exemption for greens maintenance on golf courses conducted within certain hours. But if we're not in a residential district for definitional purposes, of course, there's no need to be exempted from something that doesn't apply to you in the first place. So it's a little confusing to me. However, if you were to decide that we are in a residential district, then I would like to modify the exemption language because it's not, the greens in our mind is where you do the putting. But we have over 100 acres, and we use leaf blowers all throughout the golf course, many of which aren't anywhere near anybody, most of which. But we have areas with deciduous trees. We have areas with eucalyptus trees, which aren't deciduous, but seem like they are every time there's a big storm or a wind. They're really messy. And that's the way we clean up, because we're cleaning up acres. It's very similar to what the city does with its parks. When the wind blows, stuff goes everywhere. Except for with us, you can't find the golf ball when you have leaves all over the place. So those are my two issues. I think that we should be exempted as not in a residential zone, but maybe you have other golf courses that are in a residential district that the language was attempting to address.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Anybody have any questions for Larry?
No, but I think that's a good point, because I took it, I mean, I know enough about golf to know what greens are, but I took it to mean the whole golf course. And
we have practice facilities.
so, I mean, maybe we just would eliminate
range.
the word greens and just say maintenance on golf courses or something.
And practice facilities, too, because we have a driving range, which really
Right.
isn't the golf course, per se,
And I think
and putting green.
common sense to me would just say that yeah, okay, Big Canyon is different in the sense of it's in a residential area, but it's a golf course and wouldn't be that would be the way I would interpret it, but I don't know if the city attorney would feel we had to make a different clarification.
Or you could just limit it to land used for residential purposes within residential PCs.
I think Mr. Tucker raises some very good points that need to be wordsmithed. I don't think just leaving greens is the right way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's raised some appropriate questions with respect to maintenance of golf courses and with respect to Big Canyon regarding its different actual areas within its residential use.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, bring it back to council.
I would
Mayor
like
Pro Tem Gardner.
to move that we ban both gas and electric blowers, with your exception, Mayor Hen, of seniors and handicapped could make an exception for the private individual, and that we clarify the language of the agreement in terms of Big Canyon and golf courses in general, if we need to, and that it be an opt-out element as far as homeowners associations are concerned.
And would you add to that incorporating a 6-month grace period?
Yes.
Before you move forward, just to ask the city attorney, is that legal to do? I mean, to create a senior exemption?
You can create it. I'm sorry, a senior.
The 65 and over.
Yeah, I think you can do that. I don't think that creates a problem. It may be difficult to enforce, but as far as legally creating the exemption, I'm not exactly sure how we enforce it, but you can legally create the exemption.
All right, I'll second the motion. Do we have further discussion? Councilmember Selich?
Yeah, I'm really not in favor of the motion or the ordinance as it stands. I think, and I'm probably in I know I'm in the minority on this, but I would rather take an approach where we regulated them based on noise and not go through this complicated opt-in, opt-out. If you're so old, you can use them. If you're not so old, you can't use them. And go with a much simpler type of situation. And I found an ordinance that was adopted by the city of Menlo Park that's very simple. It's a 2-page ordinance. And what they do is they go and they limit the use of leaf blowers to what they call a certified leaf blower, which means only those leaf blowers that are measured at 65 dBAs or less at a distance of 50 feet by an independent laboratory per some national standards, ANSI Testing Institute, which I think is the new generation leaf blowers that have been referred to us by some of the industry people that have contacted us. And it just seems to me it'd be a much simpler way to deal with this. instead of getting into this complicated system that we're setting up. And I think the system we're setting up is doomed to failure because one or two things is going to happen. Either we end up ignoring it, like apparently Laguna Beach does, or we'll be back in a few years and maybe adopting an ordinance similar to this. So I'm not going to be able to support the ordinance, even though I am in favor of regulating them, but not in the manner we're talking about.
Mr. Mayor, as you discussed this, Rob handed me, it is Newport Beach Municipal Code 10.28.045, which is about real property maintenance. And as of January 1, 1999, any person engaged in the maintenance of real property, tools, equipment, otherwise, you have to, such equipment shall not be operated at a noise level that exceeds an A-weighted sound pressure level of 65 dBA as measured from a distance of 50 feet. So arguably, we have that now.
Well, we do and we don't.
We may not be enforcing it.
What this specifies is that if there's a code enforcement guy goes out to check on it, there'll be a sticker on the equipment. There's no measuring of the device. It's a certified device. That's the difference.
Okay.
Other comment? Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I had one more clarification. I apologize for Council Members Mayor Pro Tem Gardner's adding handicapped. I don't know how we'd enforce that if someone just says, "Hey, I'm handicapped," or whether I think I know how to figure out if somebody's a senior, but so I'm struggling a little bit with the enforcement.
They drive Segways.
Yes. So if you want to keep that in, if you're really, we'll have to work out some way to enforce it, but
Okay,
I can tell you I'm kind of struggling with it.
Did you mention that, or was that something I added? Did I throw in there? I mean, I'm fine with just the senior. I was just thinking there might be someone that was lame or something, and not lame, I mean, limped, say.
Well, so where are we? We're just saying seniors? Is that okay?
And if I may, if I understand the motion correctly, what you're basically saying is make these modifications, bring it back to you for first reading is what we'll have to do, because this is far too extensive. Okay.
All right. We have a motion. Oh, Councilmember Davis.
Yeah, I'm maybe in the minority as well, but I think the proposal that Councilman Selich came up with, it's just more rational because it targets the issue, which is mitigating noise. And I think that's just a more clean way to do it.
I would only say in that at least coming out of EQAC and the Cronenberg Residents Association, that noise was part of it, but it wasn't the only part of it. A lot of it was just the blowing around of the dust and the allergens.
Further comment? All right, motion and a second. Please vote.
With council members Hill, Rosansky, Selich, and Daigle voting no, the motion fails.
Okay. All right, we are done with that item. On to item number 14.
You can take alternative motions. You can take alternative motions if you want. I don't know where the failure came from exactly. You
Well,
can
I
move
think
on.
alternative motions, don't they come in before you vote on the motion?
Not necessarily. You can do that as a substitute motion, or you can, I'm not trying to tell you to do that. I'm just saying there were two other proposals that were discussed, but you can move on if you'd like.
Well, I'd be willing to consider alternative motions here, if anyone would care to make it.
I would support doing anything my goal is to limit blowers. I just think that we've made it way too complex. And I did like what Councilmember Selich had to have, and if appropriate, I would make a motion to move in that direction.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second and discussion. I'll start. That doesn't do it for me. I think this, trying to figure out what's an appropriate blower and what isn't and all of that, beyond that, it depends on the maintenance of that item being maintained, et cetera. And it only addresses partially the noise issue and not the other issues that are of concern to me. So I will be supporting that motion. Do we have any other comment? Councilmember Curry.
Well, moving in that direction is really not a motion, that's sort of a thought. So I'm not exactly sure what we'd be adopting if we were to pass this. But I don't think that's ready for prime time. I think, like Mayor Hinn, I think, we've worked a long time here. The neighborhood associations have worked a long time on trying to get something workable. I think we've got something that's pretty close to workable here. I'm disappointed it didn't pass, but I don't think we have anything that's really ready to be adopted as an alternative now.
I'd agree with that and withdraw my second. So maybe we can just shelve it. I think that's prudent.
Okay, I think the motion dies for lack of a second unless somebody else wishes to second it.
Might I move then that we adopt the motion, the ordinance as presented, exempting electric blowers?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion on now the ordinance as presented by Councilmember Gardner originally, except that electric blowers would not be banned at all?
Or was it the ordinance that we have written?
Well,
With the senior.
as moved by Councilmember Gardner to start with.
It would be as Councilmember Gardner initially moved with the removal of electric.
So there'd be a senior exemption?
No, there wouldn't be, no.
In other words, electric blowers would be allowed. Electric blowers allowed.
Electric blowers allowed, actually, and the ordinance is written as an opt-out, so that would be part of it as well. So yes, it would be as the ordinance was written.
And clarifications of Big Canyon and
a
golf
6-month
courses.
grace, a 6-month.
And a 6-month grace period.
And you're not exempting seniors.
Right. So now, Mr. City Attorney, is this something that we can move tonight, or do we need to really move for you to come back with an ordinance that's reflective of this?
Yes, you need to have us come back with, for first reading, because we don't
All
have
right.
the language for Big Canyon, we don't have the language regarding
right.
golf courses, and although we do have the opt-out.
Okay.
I'm not
Is there
feeling
anyone
quite
that
that
is
bold.
not clear on what we're voting on here? All right. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, do we need a motion for you to come back with an ordinance?
I would like it, because then I know I know I've got a majority of council telling me to do a
Right,
job, so,
right.
yeah, I would like it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
With council members Rosansky, Selich, and Daigle voting no, the motion carries.
Half a loaf is better than none. Okay. We are on to item number 14. Why do you guys always, is it just because I'm mayor that you're doing this kind of thing?
So,
I think it's just because I'm mayor that you're doing these kind of
thanks, George.
alternative motions. I think so.
That'll work. Mr. Mayor and council members, and for the folks at home watching, we spent, your council spent about an hour and a half this afternoon, so that's available on your study session to read, discussing the proposed contracting out of our parking meter and enforcement program. At that study session, there were a number of contract issues and questions that you asked us to bring back, and in conferring with Tracy McCraner, the finance director, and with Michael Torres, I think they've resolved the issues with the proposed vendor. We do have, I'm going to probably have Michael go over those proposed changes to the contract draft, and then Tracy has a couple of slides that you asked for, including different scenarios, and what will some of these things look like. So with that, Michael.
Thank you, Dave. So you have before you right now a revised Exhibit A and B, and what I can do is just walk you through the revisions we've done to address the council's comments, and these have been negotiated with Central, and they've agreed to these changes as well. Under Section 2.1, subsection E, which is the second page, this was to address Mayor Henn's question regarding only having a reduction in fees. We've changed that now to allow for an adjustment, which contemplates both an increase as well as a reduction in either revenue or the number of meters. And then in either event, it would require the city to go back and negotiate with Central for a pro rata reduction. And under Section 2.6.1, and I apologize, there's no page numbers on this, about 5 pages in, this is to address Councilmember Hill's question regarding bankruptcy. We've added language there that in the event of bankruptcy, the parking meters will automatically revert and vest with the city, and that should prevent any debtor or creditor from coming in and trying to collect against that, and would require the city to then pay the amortized portion and still due on it, or in the event of us bringing a new consultant, have the new consultant pay that fee on our behalf.
Is that really legal?
That's a preference, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, bankruptcy court can void any contract. I don't know how you're going to enforce that.
It's the same provision, I think, too. It's actually already contemplated within the agreement. If something like that would happen, we could actually terminate the agreement, and then we would still have the option of taking over control of those and paying for a 7 days' notice. I do understand what you're saying. In the event of a bankruptcy court taking it, they would control the assets of the debtor.
But if an action happens, here I'm practicing law, something like, there are 90-day provisions and so forth for determination of preferences in bankruptcy proceedings, and I thought the better answer would be for the equipment to be vested in titled in the city, and if they want, they can have a collateral interest in it, to protect their interest until we pay it all off. I thought that was the better way to go. I'm sorry, Mr. City Attorney, I'm practicing law on your behalf.
You've always impressed me in your practice of law, Mr. Mayor. But I don't believe it's a preference, because you're providing for it. A preference is when you make a transfer within the 90 days prior to the actual filing. This is actually vesting rights and creating rights at this time. Now, unless they file bankruptcy within 90 days of the execution of this contract, I don't think it's a preference. I'm not saying we can't do it through a secured interest. It certainly eliminates different issues related to a potential bankruptcy, creates others. I mean, you have to move for relief from stay, and you've got to take action in order to foreclose about that on that secured interest. I'm not entirely sure why they chose this vehicle of collateralizing this issue, if you want to put it that way, but I don't believe this is a preference in violation of the Bankruptcy Act. And I believe we can do it this way. It may not be the best way, but I suspect this is subject to negotiations with the parties.
Yes, and again, this was to address Councilmember Hill's question, which I believe it does at this point. Moving on to Exhibit B, subsection 1B. During the presentation, actually, Central had, I think there was some confusion and maybe misspoke regarding the cost there for the equipment payment being something of an estimate as opposed to a fixed cost. And Central is going to address that in a moment, but it actually was a fixed cost, and they'll explain how they got to those numbers and where those numbers came from. So there actually was no change made there. On the next page, we just adjusted. I think there was a member of the audience who had made a comment about the dates, and so we changed those dates for him. It was just moving it from May to April. And then on the next page, it would be footnote 2 we added just to clarify the council's discussion with Central that any pay-by-sale fees or merchant fees will be borne by the end user, not deducted against the city's revenue source. Well, yeah, and then under subsection E on the same page, we just put something in that was already assumed, but we just stated more clearly the city reserves the right to adjust parking meters, and it's sole and absolute discretion.
Michael, I'm sorry, I understand that part about the end user bears the fee on the cell phone transaction, but it seems like on the credit card transactions, that's not always possible. I mean, how are you defining them as the end user, or who is the end user?
No, the end user, I believe, would be the person actually paying for it over the cell phone, the customer, if you will, for the parking meter.
Okay, I understand, but the credit card one is different. You know, that's where there's authentic.
Yeah, and the credit card one, I think,
authenticated,
is
and
still accepted out within recital C. This would just be for the pay-by-cell fees. I think they said there was a separate company, like PowerCell or something to that effect, and they can address that better than I, that actually would manage that on behalf of them and then on behalf of the city in turn. So maybe
Yeah,
this
I'm
would
not
be
sure
appropriate.
third-party end user is the right language for those transactions.
And that's
I
the
think
language.
Councilmember Daigle's point is, it may be unclear that this footnote 2 only applies to pay-by-cell transactions, that the end user,
It
I
says
know,
any
but it may,
pay-by-cell.
it may, maybe you strike out or merchant and just say any pay-by-cell fees, but,
Okay, and that's fine. Central just agreed to that as well. If that addresses
And then
Councilman Daigle's
how are you
question.
going to handle, is the merchant fees going to be sort of irrelevant because they're just going to guarantee us $3 million, or how is that going to be treated?
The merchant fees would be net, so we will receive the revenues net of that fee, but the basis for that is we're expecting, possibly 50 to 70% increases in parking revenues because of credit card usage, that fee is minimal compared to the extra revenue that we are anticipating to get. So by offering credit card to our customers, we anticipate generating additional revenue to the city. That additional revenue will be net, so the city and Central will be netting that against whatever revenue we recognize. But that cost, like they were saying, they're getting the benefit of a community rate because they have over $1 billion of transaction history. It's about a 2% rate. It is a cost that's going to be net from our revenues, but that cost is minimal compared to the additional revenue we anticipate to generate because of offering the use of credit cards to our customers.
I understand about, there's sort of two pieces at the revenue projection. Who pays the fees, them or us? How does that work?
The fees we will both share in the payment of that fee because the fee will be net against that revenue before it's deposited into our account by the credit card company.
There's an example of that in the third paragraph.
But I just really encourage most cities that we call, and I listed just 7 up there, they estimate about a 50% increase in revenues just because they offer credit card capabilities. So the benefit of offering credit cards and the increase that will come with that to the city, the offset to that charge that will be passed to us is minimal compared to the potential benefit of revenue that we will get.
Just for the sake of clarity, the example here you're showing that the fees are almost 5%, not 2%. Is that just because the number was pulled out of the air?
Oh, I don't, yeah, we just gave an example. We didn't check that with them first.
Oh, I'm sorry, no,
We
just
could
to
change
clarify, Councilmember Zansky, you're saying the example within Exhibit B?
Under 2I on the page we were just talking about, which is footnote 2, it says, for example, if 5 million parking meter revenue is collected in a given year, netting out credit card processing fees, which is estimated to be $225,000. That's about 4.5%, I believe.
Yeah, that number was actually, that's not just pulled out of thin air. That number was actually given to us by Central. They had done it based on a $4 million, I think, threshold, and we'd extrapolated from that. It was approximately $45,000 a year. So when our example had a $5 million, we just increased it by $45,000. So I think they gave us $180 to $225.
I think the gentleman earlier said it was like 2%, based on $1.1 billion in annual processing.
These numbers came from Central.
So is it 2% or 4.5%?
The merchant fees are anywhere from about 1.85 to 2%.
Okay, so we wouldn't expect $225,000 in fees on $5 million in transactions.
Should be less.
should we note that?
Could we change it?
Yeah.
Actually, it should be a lot less because
That's 2%.
conceivably,
Should be
some of
$100,000.
Yeah.
well, conceivably, a lot of that's probably going to be quarters and whatever, so
Right.
even
We
$5
just
million
don't-
in revenue is not $5
Yeah,
million
we just don't know.
credit card.
Well, why not hold them to a percentage? I mean, if he says it's maximum, the ceiling at 2%, then let's go 2%. I only heard from Beverly Hills that those kinds of fees are far in excess of 2%. But if he represents 2%, why not hold them to that ceiling?
I'd have to check. Yeah, I couldn't agree to that tonight.
And this example, too, just to clarify, this is just an example. It's not actually a binding part of the agreement. It's just to demonstrate the breakdown and to show you what these numbers actually mean in a real-world setting.
But, I understand it's an example. I know how to do multiplication. That's not the issue. The issue is what is the number. The issue is how we're trading one model for another model. One model, I know we're making about $3 million a year. So I want to know that on the next model, I'm going to make $3 million a year, or what I'm going to make to take the risk of entering into this contract. And so, I mean, these are pretty basic things. The gentleman represents 2%. I'll take him at his word, but, I agree with Leslie. Maybe we should have something in here, or 2.5%, or some number that you feel comfortable with. Or if it's 4.5%, I'm happy with that too. I just want to know what it is, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I don't feel like I know what it is because the numbers are different depending on who and where I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I guess the rationale is, well, we're going to make so much more money, it just is a non-factor. I think it is a factor in any contract. I think we should have
and
specifications.
let me just add that this privatization of a city service here is different than I think anything else that we've done that I can recall. The other privatizations all involve something that didn't generate revenue. It was just an expense that we had. We pick up trash on the beach. We know what that costs us. We contract it out. We know what that costs us. We really know what the savings is. Here, there's a lot more moving parts. There's revenue from meters. There's revenue from tickets. There's transaction fees. There's potential increases in revenue or decreases in revenue. There's equipment being purchased, whether it's being securitized or not securitized, or vested or not vested. This is way more complex than any of the other things that we've done. And, I just feel we need to have adequate answers. Thank you.
So, can you identify the inadequacy?
I just wanted to have an answer to my question. Is it 4.5% or 2% or 2.5%?
It sounds like it's 2%. The key question is that a number we plug into an example? Because this is an example right now.
We'll plug into a contract.
Remove the example.
If you want to plug it into a requirement, it sounds like they'll have to check back with their legal counsel.
That remains to be seen if the rest of the council wants that. I'm not saying.
And one question for Councilmember Daigle. When you talk about Beverly Hills, is that a in-city system or is it a contracted system?
They do in city.
So they're doing it themselves, so they're not getting the same benefit, arguably, of the billion-plus in transactions that Central gets.
Yeah, but there's a wide gap between 2%
Understood.
and 15%.
Yeah. Okay.
If we do move forward with this requirement on the merchant's fee, and by the way, I think we're talking about a small element of this overall transaction, but if we do move forward with that, it should be in language like not to exceed some number, that we get the benefit of their contract as they have it, but not to exceed a certain limit,
It should, or their actual cost.
Yes.
The actual cost of the merchant fee without anything added to it.
You said it better than I did.
Which-
But not to exceed.
Which is fine, as long as we know what that is. I'd just like to know what it is today. I mean, it could change in the future. I know my credit card fees, 10 years I've been in business, and they go up, they go down. I change merchant banks, and they give me a different rate. I mean, it's not a fixed number. I agree. I'm not trying to hold them to it. I just want to know what the number is today, I guess, is what I'm asking.
2%.
2 today, Jeff? Sorry. And I guess the second question, do you think?
1.85 to 2%.
I think the proper thing to do would be to, the important part of it is, first of all, it's at cost. So that element in itself is real important, that it's at cost. So there's no other margins or anything else involved in that. The second thing is that, as you brought up, the way that the transaction charges come up, it is variable based upon a certain amount that goes through. There's other variables that are involved. So if we wanted to put into a contract what those variables were, that they were at cost, that would make sense to us.
Would that
So I
satisfy
think
Councilman?
we want to make sure that we give you all the visibility to what those are. It shouldn't be, there's no secret to it. So if we wanted to put that element into the contract, I think that makes sense.
I've lost track of where we are here. So exactly what are we saying here?
Should we put into the contract that the credit card processing fees are at cost, and the current cost as of the date of this contract is, and we'll get that number definitively and add that to the contract, I'm assuming it's 1.8 or 2%, given what Jeff said. Is that acceptable, I guess?
And that would be auditable on our behalf for Central. So instead of putting a percentage in of 2%, which we know is changing and could change daily depending on the transaction, if we could put at Central's cost, and then we can audit that on a quarterly basis or annual basis, they would make those records available to us, and then we wouldn't be tied in a contract to a specific specific percentage that we know is going to change and could change daily, if that would satisfy Councilman Rosansky.
Yeah, again, I'm more concerned about knowing, kind of comparing what we have today to what we're going to have tomorrow. And so I don't want to find out, a year and a half from now when we start getting actual numbers that, it was really 4.5%, it wasn't 2%. Or this was something a little bit different, and now all of a sudden, we're making $200,000 or $300,000, $400,000 less than what it was represented today. So I just wanted to have a comfortable feeling to what the expectation is. Clearly, things are going to change depending on, if we have a cold summer, we're going to have lower parking revenues. There's no givens here. But I just like to have a kind of a secure sense of understanding exactly what the parameters are today, I guess.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
For some reason, this is not nearly that complex with me. We get 3 million net today, and it doesn't matter what percentage the merchant fees are, we're going to get 3,010,000 net tomorrow. And the only time the merchant, and the next 1.1 million, we're not going to see a penny of. And it's only above the 1.1 million will the merchant fees even have an effect. And so when you start to go through that math, we're talking about pennies on tens of thousands of dollars. I would not like to see us delay this and lose the start of holiday time to start to reach this benefit.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Curry.
Well, I would agree with Councilmember Hill. These are all good and important questions. But the fact of it is that every place they put in credit card utilization, revenues go up. They did it with taxi cabs. Tips went up because you get the button that says, hit the button for the tip, and now you're given a 20% tip instead of a 10% tip because it's easier to do. I was in Berkeley yesterday, and it gave me the option of paying for 1 hour or 2 hours. Now, I was there for 45 minutes. If I'd been plugging quarters in, I'd have put in 45 minutes worth and hoped I was going to make it back before the guy got there because I had a 15-minute sort of lead time. But here, all I had to do was punch the button. I bought an hour's worth, got my receipt, and it was done. I paid 25% more than I would have paid if I was trying to find quarters, assuming I even had quarters to begin with, which I didn't. So that's why making credit cards, making our parking facilities credit card friendly is such an important and critical path to getting ourselves into the 21st century and to providing the kind of convenience that our visitors and residents and shoppers deserve when they go and try and find a place to park in our city.
I agree with those comments, very much so. I think part of the discussion is, who's going to pay which fees. I think part of our concerns is, that there's probably going to be a lot more revenue generated. If we can do 3.5 million on our own, they're guaranteeing 3 million. How much potential revenue is really out there?
Okay. Just an additional point of clarification. You're mixing gross and net. We generate 3.5 gross, but it costs us $500,000 to generate that. So we only net 3.0. So we would net, in essence, the same amount on a guaranteed basis with this agreement, 10,000 more.
Okay, well, from my perspective, if we get assurance that we're going to get merchant processing fees at your cost, as, in other words, at your cost for your customer base, not just unique to us, I think we've covered that issue because you're going to work darn hard to lower that that merchant fee for your customer base. And as long as we are assured we get the benefit of that, I'm not so concerned about the variability of it, given where we are. I'm surprised, actually, that you've got it down that low. That's, you guys have done a pretty good job with that, because this is small dollar transactions here, and so you've done a good job. So, in any event, I'm okay with that. I'm okay to move forward tonight.
I've got a
Like
couple
that.
more questions.
All right.
Not related to the changes in the contract, just going back to some things that I wanted answered during the study session. In the unlikely event, which I admit is highly unlikely, but I'm just curious as to how we cover it in the contract, if we don't make the $3,010,000 nut, that means they don't get the $1.1 million, so the first year's $381,000 infrastructure payment, is that forgiven, or does that get rolled over to the next year, and then we have to make it up the next year?
It's by term, actually, so it's not by year. So let's say for the first year, if they didn't make it and they didn't get the payments because there wasn't adequate revenue, but in year 4, we had such a surplus of revenue, it would then look back to the first year and pay them. So it's by term.
That's not what we discussed this afternoon. I asked him specifically, I said, so you're going to eat it? And he said, yeah. Is that?
They eat the expenses. The 381 rolls over unless we terminate the contract, and then we do have to pay it, or we do look at the term of the contract to pay the equipment of the 381. That would be made up if there was adequate revenues in a future year.
And also, just to clarify, it's all retrospective, so it would all go back to their expenses as well. So if there was a surplus enough to cover their expenses in future years, it's also term focused as opposed to year. So if that was said earlier, I think that was just a misquote or a misstatement.
Okay.
So it's by
Well, that's
term,
exactly
not by
opposite
year.
of the answer I got when I asked the question earlier. I asked the gentleman, I said, so if we only get $3 million in revenue, I said, then you guys eat it? And he said, yeah. I mean, eating it doesn't mean it's collected in years 2 and 3. Eating it means it's just, at least in general business.
Eating it is not a financial term of art.
Well, I think any businessman knows what eating it is. I know what eating it is. I'm in the restaurant business. I know what eating it is. Well, all right, so then you're saying there is a recapture or whatever down the road. So we're looking at the entire length of the contract then.
7 years.
It's not an annual basis where we go and figure this out.
I want to make sure I have a clarification then, because I still heard two things too. So the ability to grab back applies to the operational costs as well as the amortized infrastructure, or just the infrastructure?
Apply to both.
Well, point that out in the contract, because I didn't pick up on that when I read the thing. Is that in the new
It's,
Exhibit B? Is that
It's
we got
Exhibit
today?
B, it's not new. It's Exhibit B, Section 1CI.
I must have missed that.
I must have.
Is this the?
During the term. The term to date. I think he's right. I think that's the recapture language. Well, while council members answer,
Well, I got a
looking at
couple
that.
more questions.
Well, let me just comment on this point, and then I'll.
Okay.
I think you're right. I think that is the recapture language here, and assuming that that's confirmed to our satisfaction, I'm okay on that, because we'll get the benefit of our bargain, and they get paid. As long as we get the benefit of our bargain, I'm okay if they are able to recapture at a later year, because we all did better. So.
What's our bargain? The bargain is getting the 3,000,010 without having to pay for new infrastructure?
Well, the bargain is to get higher revenue here, and if revenue is produced to the level that allows them to get paid, I'm okay. That was our deal. If it just doesn't happen in year 1 and 2, but in years 3 and 4, it happens, I'm okay with that. We get the benefit of the use of money for 2 years. Steve, do you think this language does what they say?
Well, I don't know. I want to look at it closer. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm not looking to, it's got to work for both of us, clearly. I mean, you guys are business people. You want to make money. We want to make more money than we're making today and unload some of this responsibility. So it's great. I guess I'm disappointed in maybe how this report was prepared, and that I don't feel that all the issues were adequately addressed. And I'm feeling like maybe I should have spent more time looking at this, and I am an attorney, so I probably should have spent even more time. But I guess I'm more upset about the fact that I feel that the staff report is inadequate, and that there's numbers in here that don't jive, and I feel I'm upset that I'm having to dig for this, and I resent that. That's my comment.
Councilmember Selich.
Okay. On the infrastructure replacement, if you take the 381 times 7 years, it comes to somewhat in excess of $2 million. And if you divide that by the number of parking meters, it's $1,670 per space, I guess. Is that purely the cost of the meter? Is that the cost of the meter plus installation? I guess, is it labor and materials or what?
It's everything. It's the equipment, and that's some multi-space, which is about $10,000 a meter. But that's installation. That is also their financing charges, which they've already gone out and got some quotes for us. And it was, what was the other thing? Oh, the warranty costs for them. And it's their actual costs, which they will be providing documentation to us of those actual costs. But yes, that's about what it would end up being per a single space. The multi-space meters being about $10,000 each.
Okay. And then did they provide you with a breakdown on the, out of that $1.1 million, the balance of that, the operational as far as line item, how much goes for salaries, how much goes for different things? Did they just give you a lump sum number?
They just gave us a lump sum number. And that was to include profit, which is what we told all of the top 3 candidates when they came to us.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
So in terms of these revenues, and they have merchant services, are we going to get copies of revenue directly from the credit card companies, directly from, I mean,
Well,
how are we going to know what the revenue is?
The revenue is going to be deposited directly into our bank account, which only the city can access for withdrawal. We are also getting daily and monthly reports from Central of their reconciliations, and we will be doing our own independent reconciliations as well.
So when you say the revenue is deposited directly, revenue from the cell phone
Credit
company,
cards,
from the credit card, not
pay
from
per phone,
Central?
or the cash collections that they will still continue to do on our behalf.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Steve, I'm sorry, did you have something? Okay. Steve, your light's still on. Did you have more comments?
I had a couple more slides to show the council if you would
right.
like me to do that, Mayor.
Great.
Okay. I was asked, and this is also a handout for you, we were asked to bring back some specific examples of what we do now, and then a worst, expected, or median case, and best case scenario. And we worked with Central during the break to come up with some of those scenarios for you. So as we've talked about today, the parking meter revenues we receive net, as Councilman Hill had pointed out, is $3 million. That's if we don't change anything. We don't get any new infrastructure. We keep with the city staff. Nothing is changed. City gets $3 million. Obviously, Central gets nothing. A worst-case scenario is that we don't recognize any new revenue, even though we put in all this new equipment, we have this technology, we have more boots on the ground, and our revenue is still 3.5. So what does that do? City still guaranteed $3,010,000. Central would get $489,000 as their distribution. And again, just a reminder, city is avoiding that $500,000 in operating costs. The central expectation.
the 489 go to? Does it go toward the infrastructure?
It goes to infrastructure first and then operations. The 4.9 is what Central, and in doing their calculations, have come up with what they think is a most expected revenue generation once we install the 1,600 new meters and we put the new resources that they're going to dedicate. So the city would still get its minimum of $3,010,000. Central would then get their minimum of $1,186,000, which is both the $381 for infrastructure and their operations. And then the excess revenue after those allocations are done is a total of $703,032, which is in the right column. That would then be split 88.5% to city, resulting in a $622,000 allocation. The remainder of 11.5% would go to Central. So the net revenue to the city is $3.6 million in this expected scenario. Central would be getting $1.26 million. The best case scenario that they think they could get, and they think it is a possibility, but is, with everything working right and no hiccups, would be about $5.2 million. It is the level that we want to get to. It's what Central's going to work hard to get to. Again, city will get its $3,010,000. Central gets its $1,186,000. The excess revenue is now $1,003,000. That will be split 88.5% to the city, 11.5% to the Central. So those amounts of $887,000, $683,000, and $115,000 are added, and that would be a total best case scenario of almost $3.9 million for the city and $1.3 million for Central. Did any council have any questions, or did that clear up the allocations better?
Yeah, that does clear up that. But we're going to see supposedly our biggest gains immediately in the first year or so.
That's what they predict in the first 18 months.
All right. So then we're not going to see a lot of increase, perhaps, but their percentage is going to increase.
Well, the incentive to continue on with the performance, one thing that we did in our contract negotiations is Central, and rightly so, was asking for a CPI adjustment for their operating costs. Gasoline is going up, they're replacing their own vehicles, they're keeping an office here in Newport Beach. Instead of giving them a CPI inflator, which is common practice with the other agreements, we said, instead, we'd rather you continue to look for improvements, continue. We're not saying that we're going to max out. At the best potential is in the first 18 months, but it's a continual process. It will be an iterative process with Central. Technology is changing all the time. They think by the end of the 7-year contract, there'll be some kinds of new technology that we want to adhere to. So in an effort to continue that performance-based frame of mind, instead of giving them increases for obvious inflation that they will notice as a business, we wanted to give them incentive and say, well, we'll just give you a bigger piece of the revenue share so that there's yet another incentive for them to continue to look for new revenue opportunities and increasing revenue for the city. So those 5% increases in year 3 and 5 will only benefit them if they can get revenue above that 5.2. And just remember, with inflation and economics, those revenues are in today's dollars. In the future, you might approve rate increases and things like that, which, we would come back to the table with Central, and that's up for negotiation in the future. And then coming to year 5, we're going to be looking at renegotiating our contract with Central as well. Okay. Council had also asked for a couple pictures. We did print those out for you, and they're a little blurrier up on the screen. But this is an example of a single-space meter. It's kind of hard to see, but I do believe these are the same meters being used in Laguna Beach. Guys? Yes. So these are the same meters in Laguna Beach, if you guys are traveling through there, and you can see them.
Is the solar panel on the slope back of the top of the meter?
Yes. So if you see the blue and red buttons, the other flat side is that solar panel. And then these would accept credit cards, pay by phone, and coin. And then an example of a multi-space meter, and they call it Luke. And what was the story behind that? Cool Hand Luke. I guess he used to knock off parking meter caps or something. But this would be an example. And I'm sorry, it's hard to see up here, and maybe even in your picture. But we could definitely, help this council. We have committed to come back once we know and have agreed upon the locations of the new meters, and we can possibly bring in some examples in the future for this council so that you can actually see how they work and how easy it is going to be for the customers.
Are there standards as far as colors? No, I mean state standards.
Oh.
Do we have to have parking meters a certain color, city attorney?
I think that's an appropriate question. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer.
Because, I mean, I think it would be cool if we, do they have color choices? I mean, it'd be sort of neat in Newport Beach to have blue ones or something as opposed to brown, yeah, or something like that, and,
Yes, you can get them any color you want. So, for instance, ours have the front face of that on our lots is yellow, because it's our color for central parking. So when you come onto one of our lots, it's blue and yellow. But you can do whatever color you pretty much want to do.
I prefer Madras myself. Okay.
And that ends the extra presentation I have for you tonight.
Are you done?
I'm
Okay. All right. Without any further comment from, we do have more comment. Councilmember Curry.
I was just going to move the item with the appropriate amendments as presented by staff.
Do we have a second?
second.
Okay. Councilmember Selledge. All right. We do need to have public comment. So we have a motion on the table, and we'd be glad to get public comment.
Mayor Hanna, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I think there's still just as Councilman Rosansky thought there was some confusion about the $382,000 payment, I think in Exhibit B, there's still some confusion about the $805,000 payment. The staff report implied that was an all or nothing payment, that they would get that payment if they reached some revenue threshold, and if they did not, they would get nothing. Yet now it seems to be understood that it's up to that payment, and the example you were shown here, the second one, comes out some odd in-between number, $489,000. And I find it hard to read the contract that way. If that is the intent, I think they meant if revenue is adequate, they'll be paid up to that amount. But that didn't seem to be what it said originally, so it's rather confusing. Thank you.
Well, in that regard, I took the language, if adequate parking meter revenue exists, to be the equivalent of what Mr. Mosher is saying. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yes, and over the term of the contract, if adequate revenues exist, they will get those amounts.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Dan Purcell, Corona Del Mar. I know it's getting late, and it's kind of like you go to buy a new car, and the finance department goes and tweaks it and comes back, tweaks it and comes back. And I know that's not the case, but you are getting a little tired tonight, and it's a big situation. There could be a lot of money on the table. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I do have a finance degree, and I did graduate top of my class, if you can believe it or not, even though I come here disheveled all the time. And normally what I would like to see in a case like this, respecting the process you've gone through, is more of a pro forma type spreadsheet with scenarios in it. Sometimes it's less about the actual numbers that you see on there, but how those numbers change over time based on small changes in expectations down the road, 5 years down the road, the net present value of all that stuff. And I didn't see any of that, and I don't know what you were privy to or had access to. And I'm still wondering, maybe you had some inside information or whatever about, again, this phone thing, using your phone and all of that, and how those expenses, that revenue supply for the provider could change and balloon over time. And you may see that adoption of that technology later on. You might find that's maybe a larger portion. I don't know. I don't have access to all that information. But thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Back to council for any further discussion. Seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. I think we're up to motions for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the city council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
I see no motions for reconsideration. We are therefore adjourned.